basics, early diagnoses and preventative medicines. In some places, getting just that is a challenge in itself, with medical hesitancy still a barrier. This edition of The Inquiry was presented by Daniel Rosny. The producer was Matt Toulson. The researcher was Evie Absley. The editor was Tom Bigwood. And the technical producer was Cameron Ward.
That was The Inquiry from the BBC.
Good morning, Manitoba. Hello, Winnipeg. I'm Julie Buckingham. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app, and of course on YouTube. Welcome to Wednesday morning. The current temperature outside our studios here at Portage and Spence, just 15 degrees. That might surprise you a little bit. A little bit of smoke in the air as you start your day today, and that is expected to continue. But once you're up and rolling this morning, the drive to work should be a pretty good one. It's definitely going to be much warmer today and for the next few days than what we saw yesterday as we hit a bit of a hot, dry spell. Let's say hello and good morning to our team. Abby Adeyemi is our senior tech and is covering all of those weather details. Darren Morash is our YouTube producer. Corey Funk is the show's director this morning and will look after your commute. And the morning show is on until 8:37. Let's get things started by heading to our news center. For headlines, here's Matt Humphrey.
Good morning. The New Democrats have maintained their stronghold in the Pas-Commie-Sac. Jennifer Flett easily won a by-election to become the next MLA for the Northern Manitoba constituency, the sprawling constituency, continuing 6 decades of NDP rule. Elections Manitoba unofficial results show Flett's vote share at nearly 75%. The Progressive Conservative candidate came second with 17.5%. We'll hear more. And this morning we're hearing from a Manitoba apiarist. Donald Trump says a new 50% tariff will come in on many Canadian goods, including honey. At the bottom of the hour, we'll hear what all the buzz is about.
Sounds like a sweet story.
Ooh, nice.
All right, Matt Humphrey
Back
at
soon.
the CBC News Center for us this morning. Still to come, well, Baby Beluga was a song that I grew up with, I think a Raffi song, and a pod of 7 beluga whales, including 4 babies, are now swimming free after being rescued on a beach just outside of Churchill on Monday. We will hear more on Information Radio. And again, Canada in the middle of a devastating record-breaking wildfire season as we smell that smoke this morning. We'll hear from an expert about the role that climate change could be playing. We'll be back. Stay with us after World Report.
Today on Q.
I'm Garvey Bailey, in for Tom Power. The comedian Ron Funches was one of the standout participants on the last season of The Traitors. He'll tell you how being on the show led to an autism diagnosis that's changed his understanding of himself and the unique gifts that shape his comedy.
Okay, I want to lean into that, and I want to be, accepting of that.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. RCMP and West Kelowna have issued an Amber Alert for a 4-year-old boy. The Mounties say Ryan Atlas Andrews was last seen Tuesday morning, but RCMP say the boy goes by the name Atlas. He is described as 3 feet tall, 51 pounds, with short brown hair and hazel eyes. RCMP say he is believed to be with the 40-year-old suspect, Elise Andrews. Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke virtually with the country's premiers yesterday. They're in Charlottetown for the Council of the Federation meeting. And the U.S. president's tariff threat is top of the agenda. Sources tell CBC Carney tasked the premiers to think about Canada's possible leverage. And it's reigniting a debate over whether Canada should threaten to restrict its energy exports to the U.S. The CBC's Janice McGregor reports.
Well, that's not going to happen.
With Alberta's sovereignty referendum coming up fast, Premier Danielle Smith's rejecting the idea of her province sacrificing resource revenue for the greater good.
I think that what will happen is that we're going to have a pretty intense period over the next 29 days, and I hope that diplomacy will prevail.
But wouldn't that diplomacy carry more weight if it was backed up by an energy threat? New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt thinks so.
We do sell a lot of energy products to New England. We put gas in their cars, we put jet fuel in their fighter jets, and we heat and cool their homes. And so we know that we have those kinds of tools at our disposal should we need them. So we have a lot of options on where we take our valuable natural resources and who we share them with.
More trade diversification away from the U.S. could pack a punch. Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Tony Wakeham.
But I think what you're seeing now is Canada recognizing that it has a lot of value to provide to the world.
But staring down her fall election, Quebec Premier Christine Fréchette isn't prepared to cut Americans off from her province's hydroelectricity.
Personally, I'm not there. I want us to negotiate at the table, and we'll see in 30 days where we will end up.
Retaliation brought on these latest tariffs, the White House said. Retaliating even more might not stop them. Janice McGregor, CBC News, Charlottetown.
U.S. President Donald Trump's new tariffs are expected to be front and center during a Senate hearing today. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer will testify about the U.S. president's trade agenda. It's expected to include some pointed questions. The CBC's Willie Lowry joins me now in Washington. And Willie, what can we expect during this morning's hearing?
Jamieson Greer is in many ways the architect of President Donald Trump's tariff policies, and he's set to appear before the Senate Finance Committee to address the president's trade agenda, which has been the source of contention and legal disputes here in the U.S. Back in February, the Supreme Court ruled against Trump's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to enforce tariffs. That did not deter the administration, which has since used several different justifications to impose global tariffs. The hearing also comes less than a month after the administration chose not to renew the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement. Greer will likely be pressed on the U.S. decision to place 50% tariffs on a range of Canadian goods, as well as the status of various trade deals the administration has brokered.
Now, Jamieson Greer has indicated more tariffs are on the way. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, he certainly has. In an interview with CNBC yesterday, the U.S. Trade Representative says he expects tariffs on up to 60 countries over issues around forced labor.
So with forced labor, the Section 301 investigation of forced labor, again, the U.S. has laws to prohibit trading goods with forced labor. Other countries, most don't have a law. Those that do don't really enforce it. We expect to see some action soon. I can't really specify a timeline right now. I have a responsibility to brief Congress and other stakeholders before I really reveal that kind of thing. But we do expect action soon on that.
The Trump administration has been clear. It views tariffs as an important tool in its economic arsenal, and it appears determined to continue to apply them where it sees trade imbalances.
Thank you, Willie.
Sure thing.
The CBC's Willie Lowry in Washington. In southwestern Russia, a fire burns at a warehouse in Stavropol. The local governor says it was the target of a Ukrainian drone strike. The building houses Russia's largest online retailer. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says his military launched overnight strikes. They targeted Russian logistics centers and cargo ships. It came just hours after he fired his military commander-in-chief.
Я визначив, що новим головнокомандувачем Збройних сил України стане
Zelensky announcing the dismissal of Oleksandr Syrsky and his replacement. Syrsky's firing came after public pressure on Zelensky's administration following the dismissal of Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov. Fedorov's removal resulted in mass protests. Many Ukrainians attribute the advances in the war against Russia to the former minister. We're following a developing story in British Columbia. Any remaining residents in Boston Bar are being told to get out immediately. A newly started fire is burning out of control and spreading quickly. The order came down from the Fraser Valley Regional District. It says the heat and strong winds ignited the new wildfire south of the community. Many residents in Boston Bar have already been forced to leave their homes. There are 89 active wildfires currently burning across BC. 12 were started within the last 24 hours. And First Nations chiefs in northwestern Ontario are calling for an inquiry into wildfire response. They allege the government failed to protect some Indigenous communities from fires. More than a dozen communities are under evacuation orders in northwestern Ontario. 140 wildfires are burning across the region. As the CBC Sarah Law reports, the leaders are seeking accountability.
How could this happen? More importantly, how do we make sure this never happens again?
Wilfred King is chief of Gull Bay First Nation. Like several communities in the region, he says his people had to lead their own evacuation efforts as wildfires loomed around them.
The lack of communication and evacuation support should horrify all Canadians.
In the past week, 2 First Nations were completely destroyed by wildfires, Nomegusasegigan and Whitewater Lake. King is among several First Nation chiefs calling for an independent investigation into how the government has handled the crisis. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says there's been constant communication with First Nations.
On reserve is a federal responsibility. Ontario's taken the lead on this.
King says Ottawa must also be held accountable, but First Nation chiefs will not accept jurisdictional disputes as an excuse for inaction. Evacuees have shared stories about fleeing in the night, leaving personal belongings and pets behind. Ontario NDP leader Marit Stiles says they should have been given more warning ahead of time.
There was no real preparation and no real notice from government, and that they were asking for it. That's what's so frustrating.
Indigenous leaders say a public inquiry should examine everything from communications and evacuation planning to overall emergency preparedness. Sarah Law, CBC News, Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Small businesses across the country are considering their options with new tariff threats from the U.S. The CBC's Karen Pauls visited a beekeeper in rural Manitoba to learn what the new tariffs could mean for honey.
I'm looking after roughly 100 to 150 million bees.
Ian Stepler carefully opens a hive.
There, this top box is being filled up with honey.
He'll be harvesting this in just a few days.
I hope they produce a bumper crop for us, and when they do, we just want to get paid for it.
But that may be a problem, with U.S. President Donald Trump imposing a 50% tariff on everything from wine and hockey sticks to cement and agricultural products, including honey. There's a lot of uncertainty.
It could be disastrous. I mean, one of our biggest buyers is all of a sudden out of the marketplace.
Pascal Chan is Vice President of Strategic Policy and Supply Chains at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. He says the list of items to be tariffed may seem random,
but we don't think it is. These measures appear to have been designed very carefully to inflict pressure on.
in areas, he says, where the Trump administration believes it can have the greatest impact in destabilizing trade talks.
This is a pretty dangerous escalation.
It's not what Stepler, who's also chair of the Manitoba Beekeepers Association, wants to hear.
But it has the industry a little bit worked up right now, I can tell you that much.
For beekeepers still trying to recover from years of catastrophic colony losses and lower honey yields, Trump's tariffs couldn't come at a worse time. Karen Pauls, CBC News, near Miami, Manitoba.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning to you. I'm Julie Buckingham in for Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. It is Wednesday morning, 15 degrees outside our studios here at Portage and Spence. Abby has your full forecast in just a minute. Well, as you head outside, you may notice some smoke in the air in many parts of Manitoba, including the city of Winnipeg. Donald Trump accusing Canada of willful negligence in forest management. Still later this half hour, we'll talk to an expert about why the science doesn't back up that claim. Also, Prime Minister Mark Carney is ready to engage intensively with the U.S. to discuss trade issues. We'll, of course, talk about that this morning as well. Much more still to come as we take you up to Churchill about a dramatic rescue. But for now, let's head over to the News Center where we're joined by Matt Humphrey.
Good morning. The New Democrats handily won the by-election in the Pas-Kamisak. The massive provincial riding has been an NDP stronghold, with the party controlling it for the past 6 decades. We'll hear more at 6:30. And yes, many Manitoba business people say they're tired of tariff uncertainty as the U.S. announces a new 50% levy on a wide range of Canadian products. As you heard, one of those exports is honey. At the bottom of the hour, we'll hear more from that local apiarist. He runs almost 2,000 honeybee colonies and says losing the U.S. market because of tariffs would be a disaster for Canada's honey industry. We'll hear more at 6:30.
Thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
Matt Humphrey at the CBC News Center. All right, we have certainly talked about all kinds of weather conditions across this province, and as I notice, some of the air quality here in downtown Winnipeg, it definitely does look like we're going to be dealing with some smoke today. And that continues to be the situation in many parts of the province today. Abby Yadiemi is monitoring that forecast with us and gets us up to date on what we can expect.
Yeah, Julie, we still have smoke across a large chunk of northern Manitoba this morning. We're talking about regions from the Pas into Flin Flon, all the way through Norway House, Thompson, Lynn Lake, and as far as Studio Lake this morning, still under the air quality warning, smoke drifting in from fires here and even from the Saskatchewan end into the province, really making breathing and of course visibility poor in that part of the province. So if you're outside and it's impacting you, try as much as possible to limit your time outside and take it easy until the air clears. For Winnipeg right now, we're looking at temperatures hovering 15, 16 degrees depending on where you are. We have sunshine outside, some breezy conditions. We're heading to a humid high of 27, though you will notice some local smoke in the air in the city. And that's the condition across most of the regions in the south. From the Pembina Valley region all the way down to the Interlake, we're seeing sunshine, and most of the regions get into a high of 27, though we're spotting some misty conditions around the Brandon area this morning. So look out for that, but that should clear as you get into the day. But local smoke, you might notice it in the air today. So overall, it's more like a warm and humid conditions will be dominating the southern half of the province, while up north, we're still navigating those smoke and hazy conditions. Winnipeg right now, sunny and 15.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk is the show's director and also monitoring the commute today.
Hello. Yes, so far, quiet commute, of course, still some closed highways, particularly around the Roblin area, particularly the Highway 83 that runs from Roblin down south to around the Assippi Ski Hill. Look out for that. That's because of localized flooding in the area. Other than that, though, if you see something going on, if you're walking, you're biking, you're driving, you can always give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
14 minutes now after 6 o'clock, and a remarkable story from Churchill of how humans came in to save wildlife. A pod of 7 beluga whales, lucky to be alive, after being caught on a beach near Churchill on Monday. They were found stranded in a pool of water, only about half a meter deep on Hudson Bay when the tide went out. Conservation officers, RCMP, and others stood guard to keep them safe from seagulls and polar bears until that tide could return. Churchill District Conservation Officer Owen Jones was one of the first on the scene, and he spoke with Radio Canada reporter Juliette Stray.
Immediately arriving on scene, it was pretty clear that the birds had beat us there. They had been pecking at the belugas for I'm not sure how long, but it was clear that they were there for quite a while. There was unfortunately there was some blood present, and it was clear that these whales were injured, but the extent of their injuries were unknown until we could assess them further. All I could do at that time was try and get the birds away, just to buy us a little bit of time to evaluate the situation and figure out a plan. So I fired what we call bear bangers, which is a flare type projectile. We typically use them to control bear movement or deter polar bears from a certain area, but in this case, they they proved pretty handy for deterring birds as well. So the birds flew away, and we managed to buy ourselves a little bit of time to figure out a plan for how we're going to help these belugas. Another thing we have to focus on is if we can hear the whales, any polar bears in the area can hear the whales too, right? So that was another concern. It just kind of added to our duties of what we're doing, right? There's myself, an individual from Parks, RCMP member was also present, and we were all on bear guard, making sure that these whales weren't going to be attracting any bears to the area.
So the authorities ultimately were alerted to this stranded pod through Churchill's Polar Bear Alert Line. Courtney Schubert is a conservation programs manager at the Assiniboine Park Conservancy. She feels the whales will be fine because of people's quick actions to alert conservation authorities.
I think they did exactly what they should have done, which is great. Great to see. Yeah, the conservation officers are a really great first spot for that, and they'll be able to kind of best assess how to handle that situation. And yeah, it sounds like everything went exactly as it should have, and as you'd hope it would. So yeah, calling the Polar Bear Alert program in Churchill is a really great way to get in touch with them and to kind of flag that quickly. Yeah, there's a lot of trust in that community with that organization. So it's sort of, it's a great first step, and yeah, they can call necessary people, and it sounds like they did. They worked really, really nicely with Parks and other RCMP officers and stuff to kind of secure the area, and also make sure that, maybe people aren't going to go down there and kind of interfere. We want to make sure that we keep whales healthy, especially if there's a good chance that we're going to get them back out. So not transmitting, anything from us to them or them to us and that sort of thing. So every summer, beluga migrate to various estuaries around the Arctic, but here in Manitoba and Western Hudson Bay, we actually have the largest population in the world of beluga whales. So estimated somewhere over 50,000 whales that come to our shores every summer. So they migrate from their wintering areas along Hudson Bay and come to the estuaries that we have here, not only in Winnipeg or in Churchill, but also around sort of the coastline of Western Hudson Bay. So yeah, we have whales that are coming into the estuary to potentially feed, to give birth to their calves. They're also molting their skin at this time. So it's a really cool time of year to be in Churchill, and you get to see lots and lots of whales around. I think this was just an unfortunate case, it seems like, of whales potentially just misjudging tides or an area, and they just happened to get unfortunately stuck on an area maybe that they were unfamiliar with, and the tide goes out. So sometimes strandings just happen for that reason, that whales might just sort of misjudge an area and get stuck for a little while. Thankfully, they were able to be sort of monitored and refloated, and they seem to all be doing just fine. I think, yeah, given that they were sort of responded to fairly fast by the community, and the conservation officers seem to have done all the right things to make sure that those whales were safe and happy, that I have a good feeling that they're going to do well. I know I saw the conservation officers did a really great job of making sure that those whales were upright so that their blowhole could be free and they could breathe properly, keeping them kind of moist so their skin didn't, get dry and kind of, develop any other sort of secondary problems with that. And yeah, obviously Churchill is known for its polar bears, and so there's always kind of bears around, and that might have been an opportunity that a polar bear might have taken advantage of in other parts of the world.
That's Courtney Schubert, a conservation programs manager with the Assiniboine Park Conservancy, speaking yesterday with Radio-Canada reporter Juliette Stray about the rescue of those 7 beluga whales in Churchill.
You know the voices that tell the story of our province. Now you can take them anywhere. From the essential start to your day on information radio to the conversations that define our lunch hour on Radio Noon and the pulse of the city on Up to Speed, your local connection is always within reach. Just open the CBC News app, tap the local drop-down, and hit play. Your favorite voices, your province, right in your pocket. Download the CBC News app today. Your daily rhythm, live and local.
21 minutes after 6 o'clock, Information Radio. An American band, Vanshire, teams up with Winnipeg artist Floor Cry for this track. As we watch the sunrise in downtown Winnipeg, this is The Sun Arrives. You're listening to CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM.
Well, every time the sun arrives and drags along the floor, by albums from Brazil we haven't played. It sticks around, then shuffles down, it's gone behind the door. Too fast again, I'm only half awake. Try to figure out how to keep it around. Days like these, they don't come quite as often. I'll take your picture, it's an extra precaution for the tears in your eyes. When you sing, time slips away, and I'll be around when we've got nothing to say. I'll waste the day, I'll stare like a star into space.
Nowhere near where I thought I'd be at this point in time, but that is more than alright with me. I think I'd probably lose my mind if I was living the life that I once saw for myself. Trying to please everybody sounds like my personal high. Don't measure up. I felt my own kind. Different kinds of love. If you have at least one take, keep them close so there's no tears in your eyes. When you sing, time slips away, and I'll be around when we've got nothing to say. I'll waste the day, I'll stare like a star into space.
The Sun Arrives featuring Floor Cry from Winnipeg alongside Vanshire. And we are going to see a lot of the sun in the next week. In fact, today is going to be the coolest day in the next week, with highs going forward between 27 and 32 degrees in downtown Winnipeg. Well, right now in this country, 900 wildfires are burning, and over a dozen communities have been evacuated and some completely destroyed. But south of the border, much of the conversation is surrounding wildfire smoke. U.S. President Donald Trump later went on to accuse Canada of willful negligence in forest management. Here to unpack those claims is Carissa Brown. She is a professor of biogeography at Memorial University in Newfoundland and an expert in boreal forests, but she is joining us from her hometown of Thunder Bay. Well, before we talk a little bit about how the president has been reacting to wildfire smoke coming from Canada into the U.S., let's talk about the Thunder Bay area, incredibly hard hit by wildfires this summer. My second hometown, as I spent over a decade there. How are you and your family doing?
We're doing well. It's the air has cleared a lot. The air quality is really improved. I think we don't even have a warning today, which is great. And I think people in Thunder Bay, the city proper, are feeling quite lucky and thankful. It's really the folks in communities around Northwest Ontario who have had the direct impacts that are really devastating.
So what was your first thought when you saw and heard the comments from President Trump accusing Canada of willful negligence when it comes to forest management? This is your area of expertise.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'll share my first thoughts on the radio, but following those, I think I've reflected on there's a lack of understanding of the relationship between the boreal forest and fire. And so we have boreal forest stretching from Alaska, which I will point out is in the United States, all the way across to Newfoundland and Labrador. And those forests have burned in a natural fire cycle for thousands and thousands of years. And those fires are critical for regenerating the boreal forest. Species that live there rely on those fires to regenerate. And it's a really important part of the cycle that lets us have the boreal forest that we get so many benefits from. What's changed is in the last few years, especially the last decade, we've had a huge increase in the size of fires that are burning, the intensity, the heat that they're burning with, and the severity that they're burning. And also we've had a lengthening of the fire season. In some areas of the boreal forest, it's as much as an entire month longer than our historic fire season. And the reason that that's happening is by far dominated, evidence-based climate change. And so we know that with each increment of warming, it increases our likelihood of fire in a big growth of the kind of size of fires that we're getting in our fire season. And that's really because Canada is warming at about 2 times the global average. And that heat that we're getting in the summer, if we think of forests as fuel for a fire, that heat is drawing out that fuel. And so when we have something like a thunderstorm with lightning strikes, that lightning is much more likely to start a fire, and that fire is much more likely to spread really quickly. And so if there is willful negligence at play, I would say it's all of our role in ongoing climate change.
So is there any truth to the idea that our forest management practices in this country are playing any role in the fires that we're seeing right now?
Yeah, if we think about what contributes to how a fire behaves, there's 3 components. There's fuel, so the actual forests themselves. There's weather, which I just talked about, and topography, or the makeup of the landscape. And of course, the way that we manage our forests is going to affect the fuel source that's there for the fire. And there were decades in the past where fires were actively suppressed around areas where humans live. In other areas, fires were let to burn. And so that can have an impact of how much fuel there is on the landscape. But the really key places that we've been focusing on for fuel management lately, which is quite important, particularly we've been doing this since the Fort McMurray fires in 2016, is really trying to manage the fuel around communities where people live to try to break up that continuous fuel between the forest and communities. It's not feasible to manage fuel in the 600 million hectares of the entire boreal forest. So doing things like using the Fire Smart program around communities is really the way that we can manage those situations.
We only have about 30 seconds remaining. What can we do in Canada right now to prevent the negative effects of worsening fires?
I think we can make daily decisions to try to reduce our own input into ongoing climate change, and we can also advocate for increased resources for firefighting management.
Fascinating conversation. I appreciate you joining us from Thunder Bay. I have many friends and family still living there, so fond memories, and thank you for doing what you're doing and appreciate the time this morning.
You're welcome.
Carissa Brown is a professor of biogeography at Memorial University in Newfoundland and an expert in boreal forests, joining us from Thunder Bay, Ontario. Your CBC News starts now.
This is CBC News. At 6:30, we're at 15 degrees with mostly clear skies in downtown Winnipeg. We are expecting wildfire smoke today as well. Good morning. I'm Matt Humphrey. Manitoba beekeepers are feeling stung by the latest round of U.S. tariffs. The Trump administration says it will impose a 50% tax next month on a wide variety of Canadian exports. And one of those exports is honey, which has the chair of the Manitoba Beekeepers Association scratching his head. Ian Stepler says he's reaching out to his U.S. counterparts to help him understand why Canadian honey is being targeted.
We're asking them, what's the issue? Like, what is the deal? Is there any complaint? And if there is, then maybe we can work something out and figure out the solution to it. But right now, we're just this arbitrary 50% tariff put onto us for no reason whatsoever, and we don't know how to respond to it.
Stepler estimates about 20% of Manitoba honey is exported to the United States, accounting for between $6 and $8 million annually. And to enact the new tariffs, Donald Trump is using an obscure legal tool from the Great Depression. He's using Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930. It's meant to respond to situations where a foreign country discriminates against the commerce of the United States. It requires no investigation, and there's no limit on how long the tariffs can stay in place. The law has never been used before by a president for tariffs. Meanwhile, Canada's premiers resumed their annual summer meeting this morning in Prince Edward Island. All 13 leaders, including Wab Kinew, will spend several hours behind closed doors in Charlottetown before speaking to reporters this afternoon. The premiers met virtually with the Prime Minister yesterday and will meet with him in person in Charlottetown tomorrow, discussing Canada's response to America's latest tariff attack plan. In the meantime, 9 provinces, including Manitoba, are removing major barriers to interprovincial sales of alcohol directly to consumers. Manitoba's NDP has tightened its grip on a traditional stronghold. Jennifer Flett was the runaway winner of yesterday's by-election in the Pas-Comisac. She captured 75% of the vote after the NDP won 67% of the votes in 2023. Flett is a former corrections worker and counselor at a Pasquiac Cree Nation. She says she won't forget all the people she met campaigning across the sprawling riding.
A lot of them were saying that, we don't want to just see you at election time. We want to see you come into our communities, take part in our activities and our day-to-day lives. We want you to hear us, and we want to work with you. And I told them that I want to work with you as well.
Flett succeeds longtime NDP MLA Amanda Laughlin, who died from an illness earlier this year. The Reeve of Swan Valley West says many there thought the province's flood recovery grant program would cover more. The province says the one-time program will help pay for some essential contents based on the average cost of replacing them in 2026. The program will also help cover basic needs and the cost of restoring homes to a functional state. Reeve Bill Gade says the grant program was painted in a more favorable light when first announced, and the latest details may be disappointing to some constituents.
We've had a lot of our residents here go and take a line of credit or get a credit card to be able to buy the things they need, assuming they're now going to get paid back for that. And there's a surprise coming when they submit $20,000 or $30,000 of bills and instead get a $5,000 check. That's going to be very hard on people if they don't realize that's a risk they're facing.
Gade says other people are just happy to be getting anything at all. Residents applying to the program are being asked to sign a waiver committing to get more information about adequate flood insurance. And finally, a Manitoba senior is being partially reimbursed for an out-of-country surgery after a drawn-out dispute with the province. Tom Malinsky went to Germany in 2024 for spinal surgery after Manitoba's spinal clinic said he didn't qualify for one here. Manitoba twice declined to cover the costs after he got back. That comes despite a health appeal board decision urging the health minister to reconsider. The minister then met with Malinsky in May. Then a couple weeks ago, he got a check for nearly $24,000 from Manitoba Health. That's about a third of what he spent out of his retirement savings for the surgery and travel.
I don't think I was insulted by the amount. If they said, well, here's $2,000 or $3,000, that would have been an insult to me. So this would be a fair amount, I would say. I'm happy with it.
Malinsky says during their meeting, he felt the health minister was sincere about helping him. And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, head to cbc.ca/Manitoba. Your next local news is at 7:30.
All right, we'll talk to you then.
Back soon.
Matt Humphrey at the CBC Local News Desk. It is really a bright and sunny start to the morning, but you will definitely smell some smoke in the air. Abby, what can we anticipate?
Yes, you look outside, it looks beautiful, but you step outside, you will definitely smell smoke. And if you look to the northern part of the province, that's where we have more smoke concentration this morning from the wildfire, remaining the biggest problems there, bringing poor air quality and low visibility to northern Manitoba. We're talking about hazy skies and reduced visibility that's going to be hanging around for most of the day. Winnipeg right now, we're looking at 14, 15 degrees, sunny outside. Expect a mix of sun and clouds with local smoke, some breezy conditions. It's going to get humid as we climb to a high of 27 later, but with the humidity factored in, it's going to be feeling close to 30 degrees with the smoke in the air. And that's the condition we will be getting across the Pembina Valley region, the Westman, the Parkland, the Interlake region. We're seeing temperatures hover between 11 and 15 degrees at this time. Local smoke present in most regions down south, and it's mainly sunny. But up north, we're looking at a mix of mist. We're looking at some foggy conditions, some cloud, some sunshine, and ongoing air quality. So it's like a mixed bag in the northern part of the province. But Winnipeg, we're warming to 27 today. It will feel like 30 degrees.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
You heard Corey Funk in the background there answering the commuter line. He's the show's director and monitoring your drive-in.
Just got a call from Vic on the commuter line. He said the lights at Kimberley and Henderson flashing red right now. So treat that as a four-way stop. Might cause some delays on your commute this morning. Other than that, though, things are running pretty smooth. Of course, still some flooding around on the highways around Roblin in particular. So check Manitoba 511 before you hit the roads. If you do see anything else going on, you can give me a call like Vic did, 204-788-3093.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
U.S. President Donald Trump threatening to slap Canada with 50% tariffs on a wide range of everything, as you've been hearing, from hockey sticks to honey and beyond, including milk and much more. So all of that is expected to kick in on August 19th. How should Canada respond to those latest tariff threats? More on the story still to come later this half hour on Information Radio. Phil DeMont is joining us this morning with the business report. And as we have been talking about, it's been 2 days since Donald Trump threatened Canada with that laundry list of tariffs on a wide variety of products. What are economists saying about the move?
Yeah, it's interesting because you get stuck kind of more or less saying what other people have been saying. But I was looking at what economists are saying because they tend to have a little more of a, I don't want to say dispassionate, but they're kind of looking at dollars and cents in this case. Right now, they got a bit of a wait and see attitude because, as most of your people have been saying, the 30-day period before the tariffs come into effect is the key. Economists at the National Bank saying it's not a slam dunk that these tariffs will come into effect. They see it more as leverage in talks between the U.S. and Canada around the CUSMA renegotiations. What different this time around, though, is the specific focus of the levies. Things like sparkling wine, honey, hockey sticks, stuff you were talking about. Economists basically noted two things. The focus list of exports will hit specific Canadian industries hard, but without probably crimping the country's overall economy. GDP is not going to go down because of these tariffs, but they could hurt, various sectors like honey. But that could limit Ottawa's resolve to fight the new tariffs. Basically, they're going to get lobbied by individual industries, and they're going to say, look, it's going to really hurt us. And the government could say, well, it's not going to hurt the economy. Maybe we'll just give in a little bit on this one and get that thing done off the table. The other issue is the tariffed items should limit the overall impact on U.S. consumers. The way I figure it is how many families in Arizona have Canadian ciders in their fridges, and that leads to a bigger issue. The specific laundry list is an implicit concession that Trump's wide-ranging tariffs last year hurt Americans in their pocketbooks. It hit everything, so ended up costing on the Consumer Price Index. The administration does not want a repeat of that. And they're coming up to those midterm elections in the U.S. in November. The U.S. president has a very low approval rating, but the Democrats only have marginal leads in key races. So the Republican strategy, push Canada, get a deal done, and then go back to your voters and saying, see, we got those nasty Canadians to concede on the trade front.
In the sci-fi movies, there's always some robot going rogue and creating havoc. but that might be something happening in the real world. What's going on here?
Yeah, you might remember the series Westworld where the robots malfunction and start hunting humans. And we might be getting closer to that kind of an AI revolt than we thought. On Tuesday, OpenAI, the San Francisco tech giant, said one of its autonomous agents a week before broke free during a test. That resulted in a hack at the OpenAI company called Hugging Face. In other words, OpenAI, the company's system, jumped the installed guardrails and went walkabout. The now free AI program then nabbed a bunch of Hugging Face data. This is what Geoffrey Hinton, the so-called godfather of AI, or artificial intelligence, has been warning about. Programs that learn, develop a mind of their own, but then wind up doing things you don't really want them to do. We've seen a few of these instances in the past year or so. Reddit caught Perplexity AI using bots to steal Reddit data. Threat actors have been using other AI programs to scrub through third-party data. Right now, that's kind of lowish level, and it doesn't mean you have to start watching out for your Nespresso machine going rogue, but AI does appear to be making the hacking world much more sophisticated. I remember when this stuff first started out, you worried about leaving a sticky with your password on your computer screen. Now it's much more developed than that.
And how are fat cows helping to cut our grocery bills?
It's about butterfat. Now, that's the main ingredient in cream, but that's the biggest cost in ice cream. And the 19th was National Ice Cream Day. So when you're buying ice cream, you're basically buying butterfat, and that's what you're tucking into when you got a liter of Chapman's when you watch Survivor. 5 years ago, that price had been rising. You track butterfat prices by watching the price of butter. In the U.S. in 2023, a pound of butter, $3.50, highest level since 1965. Now it's $1.65. That means a half a gallon of ice cream down in the States under $6, lowest level in 2 years. Here's where the fat cows come into play. Seeing all these high prices a few years ago, American farmers decided to start breeding their cows better, investing more in these kind of setups because they could make more money. $11 billion is, I think, the amount they spent. So these bovines now produce more butterfat per 100 pounds of milk. And that's important because it basically increases the supply of ice cream. We're seeing something similar in Canada. Butterfat shipments in this country up 2% since November. Butter prices down 6% since January. Down in the States, half a liter container of ice cream's down. No word up here on whether your half liter of Cherry Garcia is any cheaper.
Okay. So you said that National Ice Cream Day was 3 days ago? How did I not know about this?
Yeah, I had looked that up. There's always a national day of something, but I thought it was coming up when I was reading the story about this. Turned out it was the 19th. I missed it too.
We can keep celebrating. It's summertime.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to yell at you for that one.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Julie.
Phil DeMont with the business news. Have you stumbled upon a humble brag or been tortured by broetry? Then you may be surfing LinkedIn, the job search and networking site. The CBC found some users love the app, while others say they find it frustrating. Let's look at the state of the platform, the good, the bad, and the sometimes cringy.
Comedian Chris Duffy once tried something silly on LinkedIn. He listed himself on the platform as its CEO, except of course he wasn't.
After I made the profile, one of the most incredible things that has ever happened in my entire life happened, which is that LinkedIn sent this email to everyone in my contact list. Congratulate Chris on the new job. Chris Duffy is now CEO of LinkedIn. That's a better joke than anything I could ever write in my entire life.
The company's trust and security team clued in a year later, and he was kicked off the platform. Jokes aside, LinkedIn user Jonathan God of Ottawa says he's tired of puffery on the platform.
It's a really weird space filled with a lot of AI content. My feed is just flooded with posts that beg for engagement in really predictable formats, and it's kind of like a corporate Twittergram as a mishmash of these self-congratulating humble brags peppered with political rants here and there.
There's an entire subreddit called LinkedIn Lunatics with similar rants. Take the trend of trauma as a business lesson. It's when a user frames a terrible incident in their life, like a breakup, as something that helped them improve at a particular work skill, like selling products. Then there's broetry or bro poetry. It's when users try to get more engagement by writing posts with emotional hooks that look like poems. They've got short, snappy sentences all on separate lines. Rob Kim says he likes to give such writers the benefit of the doubt. Kim is an avid LinkedIn user and Associate Director of Lifelong Learning for Alumni UBC, the University of British Columbia. He runs workshops about LinkedIn for students and alums.
I'm sure I've written lots of cringe posts myself, and I'm sure I'll continue to. You know what I mean? I think by the very extension of like on LinkedIn, where you are sometimes choosing to be vulnerable or you're trying to write some stories, it's impossible for things sometimes not to be perceived as cringe, right?
Another common rant on the subreddit is about AI-generated content on LinkedIn. A 2024 study by Originality.ai, an AI detection software company, shows that there's something to this complaint. The team examined more than 8,000 long-form LinkedIn posts and found that over 50% were likely AI-generated. Rob Kim says AI content can degrade a user's experience if they don't actively manage what they see.
You certainly see that, but it's also thinking about how you're feeding your algorithm, how you do a little bit of a kind of maintaining of your own timelines.
That's what Sandra Moore does.
I try to curate my feed to be what I want it to be by keeping my connections limited to people I actually know of.
She's a LinkedIn user based in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario.
I'm able to stay connected to people, celebrate colleagues' careers, hear about new books and podcast episodes from ones I'm already subscribed to. Nothing makes me want to leave LinkedIn yet.
Hamad Siddiqui says the millions who stay to network and learn on the platform offer a huge opportunity to professionals. Siddiqui is a Toronto-based LinkedIn coach with nearly 90,000 followers.
If you want to live in isolation, it's your choice. But, in this era of social media, it's just not going to work. So you have to create your social footprint. Regardless of who you are, you all have so much to share. You all have so many stories to share about your professional life.
He points to the reach of the platform. LinkedIn's website says it now sits at 1 billion plus users across more than 200 countries. According to market research firm Statista, the largest age demographic on the app is 25 to 34-year-olds, followed by 18 to 24-year-olds. That is, Gen Z and younger millennials. Siddiqui says that as big as LinkedIn seems, there's still an opportunity to be heard because there's only a small fraction of users that actually create content on the platform. He has some advice for those who want to build a professional brand on the app. Clean up your profile, be consistent, share stories, and consider connecting in person.
Maybe post a little meetup in your own area. Let's come and meet over coffee.
Given LinkedIn's position as the de facto social network for professionals, despite their gripes, both critics and fans in search of a community for their careers stay on. For CBC Radio, I'm Manjula Selvarajah.
We got to stop the fires up there.
All of us. With less local news, noise, rumors, and misinformation fill the void, and it gets harder to separate truth from fiction. That's why CBC News is putting more journalists in more places across Canada, reporting on the ground from where you live, telling the stories that matter to all of us. Because local news is big news. Choose news, not noise. CBC News.
Still ahead, Prime Minister Mark Carney says Canada is ready to engage intensively with the U.S. to address trade issues. We'll get into the latest with Trump's tariff threats and the Canada-U.S. relations still to come. Let's check your weather forecast around the province today. If you are in the city of Winnipeg, the sun is up. You'll notice a little bit of that hue in the sky. That is because we are anticipating local smoke today. A mix of sun and clouds and the high of 27. Brandon, mist dissipating, then giving some sunshine, then a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon with the local smoke and the high of 26. Dauphin sun cloud mix in 27. Flin Flon and the Paw, as well as Thompson, all under that air quality warning. And in Churchill today, a mix of sun and clouds, a chance of showers, and a high of 21. Right now, it's 15.
And also just a little traffic update for you
Yes.
too as well, Julie. It is just Henderson and Kimberly, lights flashing red right now. So if you see anything going on, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
10 minutes now before 7 o'clock, in Canada's trade war with the U.S. heating up again this week. On Monday, President Donald Trump threatening to slap that 50% tariff on a wide range of Canadian exports, as you've been hearing. In response, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, says trade talks with the U.S. will now intensify. Here's what he told reporters yesterday.
The first objective is to get a comprehensive agreement that benefits, obviously, both countries, that's consistent with CUSMA, CUSMA as it is and CUSMA as it will be, and we'll work towards that. But in parallel, when I say we will do whatever it takes and keep all options, obviously, it's a comprehensive plan.
Mark Carney speaking with reporters yesterday. It's raising many questions about how Canada should or will respond to the latest tariff threat. For more on the story, we've reached Drew Fagan, a professor at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. Good morning.
Hi, Julie.
Why is Donald Trump threatening these new tariffs at this specific point in time?
To get attention, to leverage advantage, at least in his mind, to be, the king of the process. And I'm not being too cynical, I don't think, although these are serious issues. It's not unlike, in some ways, the stunt he pulled, if I could put it that way, 3-4 weeks ago with regard to the opening of the Gordie Howe Bridge, when he essentially, on his own, blocked the opening unless the United States got revenue from the tariffs on the bridge, the fees, in circumstances where Canada paid for the entire bridge and there was no plan to give revenue to the United States. But he held us hostage. He essentially blackmailed Ottawa, and it worked. In this case, again, he's trying to leverage advantage because he can, and because he thinks Canada, without evidence, really has treated the United States unfairly. So it's important to note, one, it's on a limited, amount of Canadian goods, and two, it hasn't taken effect. It'll potentially take effect on August 19th. So we'll see if it does and what the Prime Minister's response, if any, is.
Well, the Prime Minister hasn't provided specifics on what that response will be, but he has said they'll look at all options if they go into effect on the 19th. So how could this country respond?
So it's useful, if I might, to go back 18 months, a little bit less, to when this all started. The president imposed, you'll remember, tariffs globally. There were only two countries that retaliated, China and Canada. And the president has not forgotten the fact that we had the gall to retaliate. Now, I think it's interesting to note that the retaliatory measures that the Prime Minister undertook then were, to a sizable extent, withdrawn over a period of weeks and months. The reason for that is that tariffs, in effect, are a tax on our own citizens, and they don't make economic sense, even if they're in response to other countries imposing tariffs. But they do sometimes make political sense. So there is some retaliation left. Most notably, the ban on U.S. alcohol sales in 8 of the 10 provinces, which gets Mr. Trump's dander up. I guess we'll see on August 19th, if the U.S. does act, whether the Prime Minister responds. If he does, and he may well feel he has to, with measures of equal and like effect, if you like, it'll be for political reasons, not for economic reasons.
The U.S. says it's not going to give Canada concessions or credit for concessions like dropping the digital services tax and rolling back the Online Streaming Act. So how likely is Canada to be considering other potential trade concessions at this point?
Very unlikely. For the very reason you just cited. We have acted repeatedly, the U.S. doesn't recognize this, in good faith. And I think it's not unreasonable to question U.S. good faith, including, by the way, I don't think it's unreasonable to question the value of a renewed CUSMA agreement at the end of the day, assuming one is reached, and I do think it will be. The response to that, I think, is the economic relationship primarily with the United States is so important, so primordial, that even if we fear that an agreement won't entirely be respected by this president or possibly a future president, it's still worth having. So I don't think there are going to be any more concessions, certainly not on the very popular and very high profile, that's kind of the point of it, ban on U.S. alcohol in, as I say, 8 of the 10 provinces. The only way that will be withdrawn and alcohol go back on the shelves is if there is a final agreement, I would expect.
Got about a minute remaining, and the U.S. tariffs target a wide range of things, as we've been hearing. Wine to wigs, hockey sticks, and as we're hearing here in Manitoba, honey. It also includes products previously protected under CUSMA. So what does this range of items targeted now by the U.S. suggest to you as its strategy?
Well, so it's on about $20 billion in Canadian goods exports, which is about 5%, 4 to 5%. So that's not insignificant, but it's not a majority. It is limited, and we don't know whether it'll actually take effect, which is not to minimize this. The whole thing is, irresponsible, but put that in perspective. But let's also note, Donald Trump is not imposing new tariffs on energy, critical minerals, potash, big ticket items that the United States needs, whether or not, he says that I don't need anything from Canada. The United States does need these. So this is more political than anything else. The one that caught a lot of people's eyes was hockey sticks. Somebody thought that would be cute. Okay, it's cute. But let's keep our eye on the prize, which is a final agreement, which is what the Prime Minister essentially was saying yesterday.
Lots still to come on this file. Thank you for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
Drew Fagan is a professor at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. He joined us from Toronto. Well, still to come after 7, toxic algae blooms are still increasing in the Red River, and they're harmful to humans and other aquatic life and can really mess with our fun when it ultimately leads to beach closures. A new study is looking at how those blooms and a mineral that causes them can be managed. We'll hear from one of those researchers still to come. Well, let's check in with Matt Humphrey with some headlines before we head to World Report.
Good morning. A Manitoba Reeve says many of his residents may be disappointed after learning more about the province's flood recovery grant program. The Reeve of Swan Valley West says many will feel the program covers a lot less than they originally thought. The program will help with basic and essential needs, where funding is capped at $3 million per claim, minus the deductible, up to the assessed value of the property or the cost of replacing or restoring it to a functional state, whichever is less. We'll hear more after World Report.
Thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
Matt Humphrey at your CBC News Desk here in Winnipeg. And we are starting to see that sun become a little more bright here at Portage and Spence. It is 15 degrees right now in downtown Winnipeg. We'll keep you up to date on traffic, in weather, and of course, much more still to come here on Information Radio, including our series on police-involved shootings with a mental health factor will continue. We'll go to New York, talk to a group based there that only hires workers with lived experiences and how they're helping train police in that state. Much more still to come on Information Radio after World Report.
Current. I'm Rebecca Zanbergen. Canada's premiers are meeting right now on Prince Edward Island, and there's a lot to talk about at this pivotal time for provinces and territories. Trade, pipelines, healthcare, national unity, and more.
The founding insight of our country is that unity does not require uniformity.
Coming up on The Current.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. RCMP and West Kelowna have issued an amber alert for a 4-year-old boy. The Mounties say Ryan Atlas Andrews was last seen Tuesday morning, but RCMP say the boy goes by the name Atlas. He is described as 3 feet tall, 51 pounds, with short brown hair and hazel eyes. RCMP say he's believed to be with the 40-year-old suspect, Elise Andrews. Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke virtually with the country's premiers yesterday. They're in Charlottetown for the Council of the Federation meeting, and the U.S. president's new tariff threat is on top of the agenda. Sources tell CBC Carney tasked the premiers to think about Canada's possible leverage, and it's reigniting a debate over whether Canada should threaten to restrict its energy exports to the U.S. The CBC's Janice McGregor reports.
Well, that's not going to happen. With Alberta's sovereignty referendum coming up fast, Premier Danielle Smith's rejecting the idea of her province sacrificing resource revenue for the greater good.
I think that what will happen is that we're going to have a pretty intense period over the next 29 days, and I hope that diplomacy will prevail.
But wouldn't that diplomacy carry more weight if it was backed up by an energy threat? New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt thinks so.
We do sell a lot of energy products to New England. We put gas in their cars, we put jet fuel in their fighter jets, and we heat and cool their homes. And so we know that we have those kinds of tools at our disposal should we need them.
Sounds like a threat. Is it?
We have a lot of options on where we take our valuable natural resources and who we share them with.
More trade diversification away from the U.S. could pack a punch. Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Tony Wakeham.
I think what you're seeing now is Canada recognizing that it has a lot of value to provide to the world.
But staring down her fall election, Quebec Premier Christine Fréchette isn't prepared to cut Americans off from her province's hydroelectricity.
Personally, I'm not there. I want us to negotiate at the table, and we'll see in 30 days where we will end up.
Retaliation brought on these latest tariffs, the White House said. Retaliating even more might not stop them. Janice McGregor, CBC News, Charlottetown.
The details of the Canada-U.S. agreement on the Gordie Howe Bridge have now been released. The bridge links Windsor to Detroit and is supposed to open Monday. But a joint ceremony between the two countries has been canceled due to Trump's new tariff threats. The CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian joins me now from Ottawa. And Rafi, what can you tell us about this latest development?
So Ottawa released these details after a certain amount of pressure, right, from both Conservative and NDP MPs. And we see the text of the agreement now. It says Canada will share 50% of net bridge and crossing related revenues with the U.S. for the first 15 years, minus all incurred operating costs. Canada is also agreeing to flag the U.S. if it implements more than 10% in toll increases or if it lowers the toll further than the average cost of crossings in the area. So this is a little bit different than explanations we've heard from the Prime Minister about the deal. Mark Carney has said Canada gets all of the revenues, which would have been more like the original deal. Canada has paid fully for the construction of this bridge, some $6.4 billion, and it was supposed to collect 100% of revenues until that investment was recouped. Now, again, Carney's been under some pressure to release the text of the deal. I'm not sure if that's why Ottawa's now publishing these details, but clearly someone in the Prime Minister's entourage has decided it's better now to let Canadians have a look at the text for themselves and decide whether or not the government did the best it could under these circumstances.
Thank you, Rafi.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian in Ottawa, in Russia. A warehouse burns after a series of overnight strikes launched by Ukraine. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky confirming the attacks on several Russian targets, including an oil depot. Zelensky is facing criticism for shuffling top officials in his cabinet. He has now fired his army's commander-in-chief, and Ukrainians protested the dismissal of a popular defense minister last week. The CBC's Crystal Gomansing has more from London.
Головнокомандувачем Збройних сил України стане Михайло Драпати.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced Mikhailo Drapati as the new Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief. He recognized the battle achievements of the man he dismissed, Oleksandr Syrsky, saying he delivered offensive and defensive results for the country. He also used his nightly address to tell the public he offered the very popular former defense minister, Mikhailo Fedorov, a new job. Fedorov turned down a previous offer to be a government advisor. Protests erupted over Fedorov's dismissal in last week's cabinet reshuffle. The 35-year-old tech expert was seen as someone transforming Ukraine's outmanned army into a more efficient fighting force, one increasingly striking deeper inside Russia with drones, including an attack today on a large online retailer's warehouse in Stavropol region. Some demonstrators called for Syrsky to go. The president acknowledged a rift between the two high-ranking officials. Zelensky heard the protesters, says Ilana Ivchenko out on the streets of Kyiv this morning. Drapati is the right choice, she adds. Yuri Sak is a former defense minister advisor.
He consulted pretty much every significant figure in the Ukrainian army. Of course, I support it because General Drapati is a young, battle-proven, modern general.
One that people hope will bring a new strategy, providing not only relief for the war-exhausted nation, but successes that end Russia's full-scale invasion. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
A community in southern Labrador is searching for answers. A 53-year-old woman died at a community clinic earlier this month. As Laura Howells reports, her family says she died after waiting nearly 2 days for an air ambulance.
She just had that way of making you feel welcomed and loved.
Shelley Wheeler grieves for her friend, Ovatus Morris. She says Morris had a disorder causing low blood platelets. She hadn't been feeling well, and a medevac was called on July 3rd, but weather delays meant they had to wait. The plane was expected the next night, but Wheeler says it didn't land.
We heard it, but it flew away.
Hours later, Morris died. Provincial opposition member Lisa Dempster questions why the plane didn't land in a nearby community or why Morris wasn't driven to another hospital. Provincial Health Minister Leela Evans says they're reviewing the medevac provider's contract, but said landing the plane is ultimately the pilot's decision, and healthcare professionals decide whether to put a patient in a ground ambulance.
As an elected politician, I have no business interfering with those decisions.
Earlier this year, Evans suggested people sue her and her government over medical transport delays, saying she couldn't accept being the minister if things didn't change. Laura Howells, CBC News, St. John's.
Small businesses across the country are considering their options with new tariff threats from the U.S. The CBC's Karen Pauls visited a beekeeper in rural Manitoba to learn what the new tariffs could mean for honey.
Ian Stepler carefully opens a hive.
This top box is being filled up with honey.
He'll be harvesting this in just a few days.
I hope they produce a bumper crop for us, and when they do, we just want to get paid for it.
But that may be a problem, with U.S. President Donald Trump imposing a 50% tariff on everything from wine and hockey sticks to cement and agricultural products, including honey. There's a lot of uncertainty.
It could be disastrous.
Pascal Chan is Vice President of Strategic Policy and Supply Chains at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. He says the list of items to be tariffed may seem random,
but we don't think it is. These measures appear to have been designed very carefully to inflict pressure on.
In areas, he says, where the Trump administration believes it can have the greatest impact in destabilizing trade talks. For beekeepers still trying to recover from years of catastrophic colony losses and lower honey yields, Trump's tariffs couldn't come at a worse time. Karen Pauls, CBC News, near Miami, Manitoba.
Finally,
Mona Lisa, men have named you.
The Louvre's Apollo Gallery reopened to the public today. It is the first time since last year's crown jewel heist. But its art collections and precious jewels will not be on display. The famed museum launched a security improvement plan last year, and as part of that, Da Vinci's Mona Lisa will get a new dedicated gallery. The cost, an estimated €800. That's a whopping price tag of more than $1 billion Canadian dollars.
Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Like the lady with the mystic smile. Is it only 'cause you're lonely?
Good morning to you. I'm Julie Buckingham, in for Marcy Marcusa, and you are with Information Radio on CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. Happy Wednesday morning. Still just 15 degrees outside our studios here in downtown Winnipeg at Portage and Spence. But it is definitely going to be heating up in the next few days. Abby will have your full forecast in a moment. Still to come, the Red River seeing phosphorus levels triple in the last 60 years rather. And that is leading to toxic algae blooms in Lake Winnipeg, which are harmful to not only humans, but other aquatic species. We'll talk to one of the study's researchers about how to manage those levels. We'll also find out from our house doctor on how to avoid getting sick from foodborne parasites. Those stories and much more. First, let's head over to our news center with Matt Humphrey.
Good morning. This morning we're hearing from a Manitoba apiarist. Donald Trump says next month a new 50% tariff will come in on many Canadian goods, including honey. At the bottom of the hour, we'll hear what all the buzz is about. Meanwhile, Canada's premiers are speaking to reporters before the second day of the First Ministers' meeting in Charlottetown today. Wab Canoe is speaking to reporters right now. We'll bring you some of what he said at the bottom of the hour. And the New Democrats have maintained their stronghold in the Pas-Comisac. Jennifer Flett easily won a by-election to become the next MLA for the Northern Manitoba constituency, continuing six decades of NDP rule. Elections Manitoba unofficial results show Flett's vote share at nearly 75%. The Progressive Conservative candidate came second with 17.5%. More news at 7:30.
Thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
Matt Humphrey at the CBC News Center. Let's check that weather forecast now. Abby, we're going to get some smoke here in the city of Winnipeg. Other parts of the province are under warnings.
Yeah, warnings. We have wildfire smoke really heavy across a large chunk of northern Manitoba this morning. Most of the regions under this air quality warning, except for the Gillam and the Churchill area. But you will still smell smoke in that region. From the Pas all the way towards Tudor Lake this morning, under an air quality warning, smoke drifting in from fires here and even from the Saskatchewan end, really making the air smell thick and lower your visibility. So you need to take care of your spending time outside. In the Red River Valley region, we're starting the day. Also, you'll notice some smoke in the air as you step outside. It's sunny outside. Temperatures hovering between 14 and 16, depending on where you are in the city. Mainly sunny skies. We're aiming for a humid high of 27 today, but with the humidity factored in, it will feel around 30 degrees, and that's what we're seeing across the southern regions. 11s to 16s at this time, highs close to 30 degrees, while up north it's more about 8 to 19 degrees. An ongoing air quality warning with a mix of mist, some foggy conditions, and sunshine up in the north with highs close to 27 degrees. Churchill right now, we're looking at temperatures around 14 degrees. There's a slim chance of showers for that part of the province. Winnipeg, 15 right now.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk is our show's director and also monitoring the commute.
Yes, the only thing I've heard of so far might still be an issue. You haven't heard any changes yet, but Henderson and Kimberley, the lights are flashing red as about an hour ago, so may still be an issue. So treat that as a four-way stop. If you do see anything else though going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
14 minutes after 7 o'clock, and the amount of phosphorus going into Lake Winnipeg from the Red River has been an ongoing problem, and experts say it is tripled over the last 60 years, causing toxic algae blooms, which can be harmful to you and me as we try to enjoy the summer swimming season, as well as aquatic species. And a new study is looking at how to improve the management of phosphorus levels. Adam Yates is an aquatic ecologist and biology professor at the University of Waterloo. He joins me now to talk about what he's learned from the research. Good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me on.
Well, you're in Waterloo, so how did you end up studying the condition of Red River and ultimately Lake Winnipeg?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting story. Actually, my first opportunity as a researcher was with Environment and Climate Change Canada back in the early 2000s when we were really starting to get worried about the condition of Lake Winnipeg. And so I started doing some research then and with looking at, the tribs in the Red River Valley and working with Environment Canada scientists and still working on it today as it's a fascinating and really important problem that we need to get a handle on.
What motivates you to study lakes and rivers?
Well, yeah, I've been interested in rivers for a really long time and lakes. I had the opportunity growing up in Southern Ontario to spend a lot of time around water, which was, something that was really of interest to me. And one thing I've seen is the quality of our systems, often getting poorer. And it kind of motivated me to figure out, how these systems work and what we can do to better manage them, because I enjoy spending time in them and a lot of people enjoy spending time around rivers and lakes and the opportunities that they provide. And so having that knowledge to be able to figure out, how do we make sure that we can continue to use them, that our children continue to use them moving forward is really important to me.
You say phosphorus has tripled in the Red River in the last 60 years. Ultimately, that feeds into Lake Winnipeg. How has this all happened?
Yeah, it's actually a really long story because it is over the 60 years, and it's not that it just started happening. It has been going up slowly since the 1960s. Had a really big bump in the 1990s in terms of the rate of increase, and it continues to increase today. And it's numerous sources that are resulting in the phosphorus. And what our work is showing is that those sources are actually changing over time in terms of where the dominant sources are. And in the more distant past, it was largely due to particulate phosphorus. So that's phosphorus that's bound to soils. And so coming off of fields due to erosion. And what we're seeing is that form of phosphorus that's the main kind in the river is actually shifting towards what we call dissolved phosphorus. So that's phosphorus that isn't bound to particles. And it comes from different sources. So for example, wastewater is an important source of dissolved phosphorus. But so are, leaching from plants on agricultural lands and leaching of soils. They can release these dissolved phosphorus forms. And that's all being increased due to climate change because we're seeing much greater amounts of precipitation, especially in the summer season, than we used to. So it used to be that a lot of the phosphorus would move with snowmelt, and it still does. The predominant time that phosphorus moves into the Red River is during snowmelt, but the proportion that's moving in other seasons is growing. And that's due to increased precipitation and more runoff from the landscape. So we've got multiple sources that need to be addressed. It isn't just one place that this phosphorus is coming from. And so, it's going to take a lot of different efforts in order to get a handle on how we control and reduce that phosphorus getting into the river.
So we know that phosphorus causes these toxic algae blooms. Is this a case of that we need to remove it all? Or is this like when you test a pool and you got to make sure everything's sort of in balance so that you have that sparkling water? So do we need to cut it all, or is this a balance thing?
No, phosphorus is a really important element. It's an essential nutrient for all life. So we have to have phosphorus in the water. And in fact, prairie rivers and streams have historically had a lot of phosphorus in them naturally because the soils are so rich in phosphorus. That's why the region is so good for agriculture. But when you get too much of it, you get too much growth of algae within the lakes and the rivers, and that's when you start to get problems. And it's about kind of finding the balance in terms of how much phosphorus is going in. You definitely don't want to cut it all off because we would not have a lot of the life in the rivers and lakes that we actually enjoy. For example, fish, because ultimately they need that food at the base of the food web in order to grow and for us to catch them. And then so we need that phosphorus, but it's about figuring out how to make sure there's not too much coming off of the land.
When it's too high in the water, it causes those blooms that many people would have seen on Lake Winnipeg. What are the impacts on water species?
Yeah, so it really depends on the species. For example, some of the types of algae really like it, and that's what we're actually seeing is the proliferation of, in fact, it's blue-green algae, which isn't even an algae at all. It's actually a bacteria that tend to really like having lots of phosphorus in the water. And when they are dominant in the water, they actually create a lot of shade on the surface of the water. So things that live underneath them that need light, so other types of algae and other plant species will actually disappear from the lake. And that's one of the things we're seeing is a shift in the types of algae that are in the lake. But also when all that biomass, so all that algae dies, it decomposes, and the bacteria that do that work of decomposing the algae consume huge amounts of oxygen to do that. And that actually can create dead zones within lakes. And that's something that happens quite often in Lake Erie here in Ontario. But if that starts to happen, that's when you start to see fish kills. And then we'll start to see other types of organisms disappear from the lake as well.
And what kind of impact does it have on us if we're swimming in that?
Yeah, so it depends on the algae. So if it's algae that isn't producing toxins, it's mostly a nuisance thing. It creates odors on the beach. It looks bad. It's not something you want to be in from a recreational perspective. And from a drinking water perspective, it can create taste and odor problems. If those algae, though, especially that bacteria, that cyanobacteria, they can produce certain types of toxins depending upon the balance of phosphorus and nitrogen and other factors. And if you get those toxins, that's when it becomes actually a health hazard for both terrestrial animals, pets, and humans. So that's a situation you definitely want to avoid because that can create pretty serious risks for health.
This is being worked on both sides of the border to correct the issue, yet some forms of phosphorus, as we know, are increasing. So would be some of your recommendations to tackle this challenge?
Yeah, it is definitely a cross-border problem because the Red River is a transboundary waterway, and the station that we collected most of our data from is actually quite near to the border. So most of the information we have is based on the U.S. side. Because that's the station that has the best monitoring for the longest record. But it's something that we have to work together on in order to address the problem from both sides. So that's certainly something that I would recommend. And it is happening at quite a high rate in terms of that cross-border collaboration on this problem. From our study, what we've seen is really needed is that the management practices that have been in place appear to be working in the terms of reducing the one form of phosphorus, but now we're seeing this increase in the dissolved form of phosphorus. So we're going to need some new strategies and some new management practices that are effective for that form of phosphorus and also for the change in the season, because it used to be most of the water was moving with the snowmelt. And well, now we have a lot of water moving in the summer and in the fall. And so we need management practices that can address those times as well. And so it's there's a lot of new, the system is dynamic. It's not staying the same. And so we need to make sure our management strategies are adjusting as the system adjusts.
Thank you for doing this and for being invested in the Red River and Lake Winnipeg as much as many Manitobans are. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much for having me.
Adam Yates is an aquatic ecologist and biology professor from the University of Waterloo studying how to better manage high phosphorus levels in Lake Winnipeg.
You know the voices that tell the story of our province. Now you can take them anywhere. From the essential start to your day on information radio to the conversations that define our lunch hour on Radio Noon and the pulse of the city on Up to Speed, your local connection is always within reach. Just open the CBC News app, tap the local drop-down, and hit play. Your favorite voices, your province, right in your pocket. Download the CBC News app today, your daily rhythm, live and local.
Still ahead on Information Radio, we'll hear from a group working with police and even training them to respond to mental health calls.
And when people know that they're not alone and that they're being heard, that's what really propels the engagement to a more positive kind of relationship.
We'll tell you more about that New York-based organization still to come on the show. Scott Regehr joins us now for a look at sports. And Scott, I'm a Blue Jays fan. I flew to Toronto last year to see the team, and I even have the pajamas with the logo over my heart, and my heart is breaking. Scott. Another loss.
There's nothing I can do.
No, I know.
Don't shoot the messenger here. The news is, as a forewarning, is not going to be stellar. but I'm afraid, used to that this season, aren't we?
Unfortunately, yes, we're getting used to it. And this loss hurts a little deeper.
Yeah, did we just see, Julie, Kevin Gossman pitch his final home game with this team?
I don't know.
Right? It was another hammering at the hands of Tampa Bay, after which the analytics set gave Toronto just a 9% shot at making the playoffs. So there'll likely be buyers at the trade deadline, and Gossman was asked about that.
Not a great lasting impression. I'm not going to think about that too much because I'm a Blue Jay right now, and the focus is this team and this room and those guys, and so that's where my mind's at right now, but that is kind of crazy to think about.
Now, since coming to the team in 2021, Julie, Gossman has proven to be one of the most reliable starters in Jay's history. His earned run average over that span has been in the threes. It's been the same this season, if you discount his first innings, which have been atrocious. Gossman's ERA in those, in the sevens. So any potential buyer for Kevin Gossman might want to consider using an opener first. Toronto can still render this whole idea moot, of course, but only if they start winning, including another game tonight against Tampa Bay. Closer to home, the Gold Eyes, they were losers last night, 11-7 to Sioux Falls. They are still, Winnipeg, still in a playoff position.
Tampa Bay, we never play Tampa Bay well anyway.
No, it's a bogey team among bogey teams, yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. Let's hit the pavement, I guess, to cycling, where we're entering the final stretch of the Tour de France.
We are. Today, riders, Julie, will compete in the 17th of 21 stages, which starts in Chambéry in the French Alps. Ottawa's Derek G. West is the only Canadian involved. He's currently in 29th overall. Slovenia's Tadej Pogačar is the current leader and no longer has to worry about the challenge of one of his biggest rivals. That would be Denmark's Jonas Vingegaard, a two-time champion who crashed on the 15th stage. Vingegaard partly blames that accident, where he misjudged a corner and broke his collarbone, on sleep deprivation. He says he was woken up at 2 a.m. by drug testing officials, and that has many within the sport crying foul, including, yes, the former 7-time Tour champion, Lance Armstrong.
This is the hardest sporting event in the world. Sleep is essential. Now, obviously, nobody here is going to be a proponent of not having controls, but this isn't a sporting issue. 2 a.m. is a human rights issue. I'm speechless. What are we doing? It just makes no sense.
I'm almost speechless, Julie, listening to Armstrong talk human rights. He, of course, had his 7 Tour titles stripped after admitting he used performance-enhancing drugs for much of his career. It is Armstrong's indiscretions that have largely led to the extra rigorous testing we see today, with riders subjected to it after every stage and at random times in between. Now, they do have to sleep at some point, so they're usually not tested between the hours of 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., but the use of performance enhancers has become so sophisticated, Julie, that the International Testing Agency says it has to break even those curfews sometimes to prevent microdosing. And that's the latest from the Tour de France.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, to the Commonwealth Games now. Those start tomorrow.
Aye, and we can thank Glasgow for that. The city came to the rescue, Julie, to host the games after the Australian state of Victoria pulled out over ballooning costs. There will be a reduced program with 10 sports being contested. Well, actually, there will be 16 disciplines in total since the Commonwealth Games integrates parasport as well. They're unlike the Olympics/Paralympics in that way, and Canadian wheelchair basketball star Katie Dandeneau says she prefers this approach.
It creates a lot of exposure for parasport, where you get fans who are most familiar with stand-up sport, and then the next game in a session is parasport. Like, I'm sure a lot of fans will get that first opportunity to see a parasport competition, and I just think it's a really positive event in that respect, just for the exposure of parasport.
That is wheelchair basketball player Katie Dandeneau from Pender Island, BC. She will be one of Canada's flag bearers tomorrow. The opening ceremonies get underway at around 2 Central Time, and CBC and CBC Gem will carry live daily broadcasts from Scotland.
Well, a beautiful country. If you've ever had a chance to go there, enjoy the scotch and maybe some sports at the same time. Thanks,
You're
Scott.
preaching to the choir.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
You bet.
All right. Still to come on Information Radio. I know you will hear a little bit from Premier Canoe coming up at the bottom of the hour. We'll have extended tape of what he had to say at the Council of the Federation. And even though it's mainly affecting people in the United States, Canadians have questions about the diarrhea-causing cyclospora parasite and how to avoid it. Our house doctor will also be by. 7:30, that means your CBC News starts now.
This is CBC News. At 7:30, we're at 15 degrees with mostly clear skies in downtown Winnipeg. We are expecting wildfire smoke today as well. Good morning, I'm Matt Humphrey. The latest round of U.S. tariffs is leaving Manitoba honey producers with a bitter taste in their mouths. The Trump administration says it'll impose a 50% tax next month on a wide variety of Canadian exports, and one of those exports is honey. Ian Stepler is the chair of the Manitoba Beekeepers Association. The Miami area farmer says the tariffs would be disastrous.
How do you run a business like that with this sense of uncertainty of what we're going to get paid for our product right in the middle of the season when we need to be selling our honey to our customers, and our customers want our product because we produce a really high quality product? So how do we resolve this without collapsing our industry?
Stepler estimates about 20% of Manitoba honey is exported to the United States, accounting for between $6 and $8 million annually. Meanwhile, premiers are speaking to reporters ahead of the second day of the leadership meeting in Charlottetown. Wab Kinew is meeting with other leaders and the Prime Minister to come up with a response to the new U.S. tariffs. He was critical of Trump as he spoke to reporters moments ago.
Nothing unites like a common opponent. And there's no more popular opponent in Canada right now than Donald Trump. He's raised the price of gas with his war in Iran more than we could ever raise by changing our exports. So we just have to kind of choose our spots, pick our battles. So I think tools like the booze ban, maybe some other measures that the federal government wants to put on the table.
Kinew did not specify what those measures would be. 7 other provinces now are joining Manitoba in removing major barriers to interprovincial sales of alcohol directly to consumers. And to enact those new tariffs, Donald Trump is using an obscure legal tool from the Great Depression. He's using Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930. It's meant to respond to situations where a foreign country discriminates against the commerce of the United States. It requires no investigation, and there's no limit on how long the tariffs can stay in place. The law has never been used before by a U.S. president for tariffs. In other news, the Reeve of Swan Valley West thinks some people may be unhappy with the latest details about the Flood Recovery Grant Program. The province says the program will help cover basic needs and help pay for the cost of replacing or restoring homes to a functional state. Coverage for some essential contents will be based on the average cost to replace them in 2026. Reeve Bill Gade says some people have already taken out lines of credit, thinking they'll be reimbursed for what they've had to replace. He expects they'll be disappointed with the new details.
It was announced as this wonderful thing, and the words were used, program will cover the cost of repairs up to the assessment of your house. And so I think a lot of people at that point thought, oh, this is really good. This is like insurance. We're actually going to fix our house. And what we're finding out is the program really doesn't do that, like people had assumed it would. It covers a lot less than they were thinking.
The province says it's introduced an assessment model for Manitobans with flooded basements to help them get funding quickly. Yesterday's provincial by-election in the Pas-Kamisak was won handily by the NDP. Former corrections worker Jennifer Flett captured 75% of the vote, outdistancing challengers from the PCs, the Liberals, and the Keystone Party. Flett has also served as a councillor at a Pasquiac Cree Nation. She says she won't forget all the people she met as she campaigned across the sprawling riding.
It was an incredible area, so many good people to talk to, but their voices were heard, and I really liked experiencing the communities and the beautiful people that live there. It was really, really good.
Flett now succeeds longtime NDP MLA Amanda Laughlin, who died from an illness earlier this year, and the NDP continue to hold 34 of the 57 seats in the Manitoba legislature. And finally, a Manitoba senior is being partially reimbursed for an out-of-country surgery after a drawn-out dispute with the province. Tom Malinsky went to Germany in 2024 for spinal surgery after Manitoba's spinal clinic said he didn't qualify for one here. Manitoba Health twice declined to cover the costs after he got back. That's despite a health appeal board decision urging the health minister to reconsider. The minister then met with Malinsky, and a couple weeks ago he got a check in the mail for about a third of the $77,000 he spent.
This took far too long. Dealing with these people was stressful. The appeal board, that process was fine, but just when health, seniors, and long-term care still denied it, even though the appeal board sided with me, I just couldn't understand it.
Malinsky says he's happy for the money, even if it didn't cover the full amount. And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, head to cbc.ca/Manitoba. Your next local news will be at 8:30.
All right, we'll see you then, Matt.
Back soon.
Matt Humphrey at your news center. Lots still to come in terms of weather. As I look across the forecast for the city of Winnipeg, Abby, I'm seeing lots of sunshine, but smoke is going to be a factor.
Yeah, the province is dealing with severe wildfire smoke in the northern part of the province, and down south we will notice it also, though the southern regions will be enjoying warm and humid summer day. Here in Winnipeg, we're starting the day between 14 and 16, but we're tracking 16 degrees at the Fox under sunny skies. Expect a humid high of 27 with a humidex around 30. And in the southern regions, we're seeing 15 degrees across board, while up north, the yellow air quality warning still remains active, with temperatures warming up to 27 in the region. Winnipeg, 16 and mainly sunny now.
Thanks, Abby. Corey Funk is the show's director and watching your commute.
Yes, very quiet commute overall. Just got an update on those lights that were flashing red at Kimberley and Henderson. Someone called the commuter line to say that they actually are now back up and running. No issues there. Pretty smooth commute overall, but if you do see something going on, you can give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Corey. And with the ongoing outbreak of a diarrhea-causing parasite called Cyclospora still making headlines in the U.S., Canadians have been asking if we are at risk from this gut infection as well, and what makes it different from other germs and outbreaks. Dr. Raj Bhardwaj has some guidelines to help keep you safe, and he spoke with my co-host this morning, the CBC's Corey Funk.
Good morning, Corey.
So we haven't heard a lot about Cyclospora infections in the past. Why not? Is this a new thing?
This is not a new thing. It's just not a common thing in Canada. This parasite can't grow and thrive in our environment very well. And remember, there's a lot of germs that can give humans intestinal distress, but most of them are either viruses, right? Think norovirus, like outbreaks on cruise ship, kind of daycare kind of virus, or bacteria like Salmonella or Campylobacter E. coli. But outbreaks from parasites are less common. So Cyclospora, there have only been about 5,400 cases reported in Canada in the past 20 years or so, but that's probably an undercount because it's pretty hard to find this parasite sometimes compared to finding E. coli or Salmonella bacteria, for example. But remember, about half the time, if you're having diarrhea, it's because of a virus. And then bacteria are also super common. Salmonella causes about 40% of food-related outbreaks. Campylobacter, another bacteria, doesn't cause as many multi-case outbreaks, but does cause a lot of individual cases. But yeah, we do get Cyclospora infections each summer because that's when we're importing fresh produce from places where Cyclospora can grow and thrive. And then contaminate the food. So we've seen cases in Alberta and Quebec at least this summer. I won't be surprised if we, find more as we look harder for it. But those cases generally were in people who were like in Mexico and got sick there, or at least got infected there, started having symptoms while they were here.
Do we know where exactly it's coming from in the U.S. at least?
Yeah, it's really hard to tell right now. The investigators are looking very carefully, but right now, basically, it's in the supply chain somewhere. Investigators are looking at things like lettuce and, bagged salad and herbs and berries and things because cooking kills these parasites. So it's more likely to be in things, or on things that are eaten raw, like lettuce and berries and such. But Cyclospora outbreaks are really hard to track and harder to track than a lot of other outbreaks. And partly because from the time from when you eat something that's contaminated with this parasite to the time when you actually get diarrhea from it can be a couple of weeks. And whenever I see patients with symptoms, they always want to tell me the last thing they ate, and they're going to blame it on that. It's like, oh, I just had fries at McDonald's, and now I'm sick, so it must have been the fries. But there's always a period of time between when germs get into you and when your body starts to get the germs out of you. And so for something like norovirus, that incubation period, we call it, is around 24 to 48 hours. So it's not usually the last thing you ate. It's something that you touched or ate in the last day or two. For Campylobacter, for example, that incubation period, the time from exposure to symptoms, is more like 2 to 5 days. E. coli, usually around 3 to 4 days, up to 8 days. But for this cyclospora, it's a few days up to a couple of weeks.
And you said it's coming in from other places where cyclospora parasites can grow. Do we not have this parasite in Canada?
Yeah, generally we don't. So this parasite has an interesting life cycle where basically the cyclospora spores need to sit and stew in warm, moist conditions, like in fields or ditches, at temperatures between about 22 to 32 degrees Celsius for days to weeks before they actually develop into the infectious form. So the idea is that these parasites are typically found in warmer places, right? Mexico, Central, South America, Asia, Southeast Asia, but not so much in Canada. So when we see outbreaks or clusters of cases here, it's often in people who have traveled to those areas and then been exposed and then came home and got symptoms, or who ate foods at home that were imported from those areas. And that's what we think is going on in the States, is that people in the States are eating foods that are imported from those areas. So with this outbreak, public health detectives basically are speculating and suspecting that maybe big rainfalls in Mexico a couple of months ago could have led to some flooding. And then human sanitation water basically getting flooded either onto farmers' fields or into irrigation ponds or streams. And then that's where the cyclospora parasites had time to do their little incubation. And then, they got watered onto fields of lettuce or whatever. And then, they got into the supply chain, and now people are getting symptoms.
How would someone know that they had a cyclospora infection rather than, one of the many other gut infections you can get?
This is the thing. You might not know, right? All of those germs, norovirus, E. coli, Campylobacter, cyclospora, all cause similar symptoms. And I might add that pretty much all diarrhea is explosive. So symptoms probably aren't that helpful to distinguish it. And most of the time, if a generally healthy adult goes to the doctor with these symptoms, unless there are some red flags for us, right? So things like there's blood in it, or you're immunocompromised or pregnant, or you've been drinking untreated water while hiking, or you've been traveling outside of Canada, or maybe, even to the States, or it's been going on longer than about a week. Then, generally we're not even going to get you to collect a sample to send off for testing, because the vast majority of the time your body is going to kick most viral and bacterial cases on its own. Now, these parasites like cyclospora can definitely linger longer and might need specific treatment. And it's a bit different if it's a young child or an elder or something, because they're more prone to problems from all of those germs. But blindly throwing antibiotics at people with symptoms isn't a great idea either, because for some germs, if we treat you with antibiotics, it actually makes you contagious longer, and it can make you sicker. So most of the time, it's going to be about supporting your body while it kills the germs and cleans up the inflammation and then restores your normal gut microbiome. But if you have any of those factors that I just mentioned, then, for sure, it's time to get personal advice.
And this all, of course, sounds like an excellent thing to avoid. What can Canadians do to stay safe from this parasite or other stomach infections in general?
Right. So remember that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and Health Canada are always actively monitoring for germs like cyclospora coming in on imported fruits and vegetables, right? But one of the best things that you can do right now, shop local, right? This parasite doesn't thrive in our climate. So if you grow your own herbs or, shop for produce that's grown in Canada, then you're going to stay pretty safe.
Well, Dr. Bardwaj, thank you.
My pleasure.
That's House Dr. Raj Bardwaj in conversation with our Corey Funk. Happening just a few short moments ago, we heard from Premier Wab Kinew. As a new round of tariff threats loom, the Premier is in PEI for the Council of the Federation ahead of today's talks. He scrummed with reporters earlier this hour on a wide range of things. Here's some of what he had to say, starting with his response to U.S. President Donald Trump blaming Canada for wildfire smoke south of the border.
I have a lot of compassion and empathy for people who are out of their homes right now. We have some in Manitoba, but obviously it's far worse in Ontario. We went through that last year. So anybody who's making comments like that is not showing basic human decency. And I would remind our American friends that Manitoba had wildfire fighters in your country this wildfire season, helping to put out American wildfires. And we'll continue to do that no matter what the Trump administration says, because that's what decent people do. They help each other during times of emergency. They don't try to capitalize for cheap political points.
Do you support a pipeline from Alberta to Sarnia, Ontario?
I'm open to it. I love Alberta. I love Albertans, so willing to entertain the idea.
Are you talking to Smith, Moe, and Ford about it at all?
Well, I'm sure we will. Yeah, we have been, talking over the past number of months. Been talking to Indigenous leaders in Manitoba, talking to average Manitobans. On the one hand, there's always the questions that get asked about major projects these days. On the other hand, having spent a few days in Portage la Prairie, Manitoba last week, I can tell you there's probably a lot of people who'd like to work on a pipeline. So I'm open to it, and if it's going to make Canada stronger, great. But of course, we want to see things done in the right way. We want Indigenous governments on side. We want workers taken care of. We want the environmental concerns all looked after. So, those will be the conversations we have.
You sound a bit more open to it than you were when they initially proposed it. Has something changed or rethought?
I think I'm giving you the exact same line.
Oh, okay.
I think I said literally verbatim. I'm open to it.
A bit more stern, I thought.
Oh yeah. Well, now we're reading into tones, so there we go.
So on the pipeline, do you see more potential for an offshoot to Churchill if this Ontario pipeline went through?
Potentially. That's there's a lot of things that are possible right now. Yeah.
So is Ford open to that, or others open to that?
Well, I think they put it in their press release. Yeah. Like a nod to it, at least. Yeah.
Did you feel that others kind of throwing you a bone, though?
Well, we're throwing everyone's throwing each other bones. So I think it's an exciting time to be a Canadian. Lots of economic development on the horizon.
Is there anybody you're hoping to hear from the Prime Minister when you guys meet face to face tomorrow?
I think Prime Minister Carney gave us an excellent brief yesterday, some insight into his thinking right now. And I think the focus of the discussion tomorrow is really going to be a bit more on the details of what this negotiation towards a new arrangement with the U.S. is going to look like on CUSMA, and then what the potential next steps would be if 28 days from now we're having that 28 days later conversation.
We say detail, what are you hoping those details? What kind of level of briefing are you guys hoping to get?
I think the American president is very vulnerable right now. The cost of living is a political disaster for Donald Trump. And a lot of people in Canada are saying in order for us to get a CUSMA deal, we should give him a win. But I'm wondering whether we should.
3 years ago, the ask from the premiers was 35% Ottawa funding for healthcare. What is the ask now? What is the sort of request?
Well, I think aspirationally the ask is always to get back to 50-50. That was the case historically, as you know. I think that's part of the discussion today. So I think we all agree that we want to see an increased federal share of investments in healthcare. This is about a fundamental Canadian value, universal access to healthcare. This is one of the things that sets us apart from Americans. This is one of the reasons Canadians live longer than Americans. And this is one of the reasons why businesses should realize that their investment in Canada is more competitive than putting those dollars to work in the States, because they would be paying less towards the healthcare costs of their employees than they would be in their country. So again, whether you're a proud Canadian, whether you're in line with Carney's investment agenda, or whether you just want to have a long life and prosper, I think the case for investing in healthcare is very, very clear.
That is Premier Wab Kinew speaking with reporters in PEI ahead of the Council of Federation meetings with his other provincial and territorial leaders. He spoke earlier this hour. After 8 o'clock, a gang based in India with a growing presence in Canada now being linked with a recent extortion case right here in Winnipeg. We will hear more about this gang's activity in the country and whether you should be concerned. Again, that is after 8 o'clock. Let's quickly check your conditions expected around the province today. A mix of sun and cloud for the city of Winnipeg, some local smoke, and the high of 27. Mist dissipating in Brandon, then giving way to a mix of sun and cloud. Also some smoke and the high of 26, but feeling like 30 degrees. Dauphin, a mix of sun and clouds, chance of showers or a thunderstorm later on. Widespread smoke, high of 27, feeling like 31. Then the yellow air quality warning is in effect for Flin Flon, the Paw and Thompson areas. Sunny, local smoke, highs of 27, but feeling like 32 for Flin Flon and the Paw, high of 25 for Thompson. And in Churchill today, a mix of sun and clouds, chance of showers, and the high of 21 degrees. Right now, it is 15 in downtown Winnipeg. 10 minutes now before 8 o'clock in our series, looking at different perspectives on police shootings where mental health is a factor continues. Over the past 7 years, CBC Manitoba has reported on 6 fatal incidents with officers that appear to involve mental health calls, including one just last week in Winnipeg's Linden Woods neighborhood. The Winnipeg Police Service has the Alternative Response to Citizens in Crisis, known as ARC. That program pairs officers in plain clothes with mental health workers, but its hours are from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and ARC does not attend calls where violence could be a factor. People USA is based in Poughkeepsie, New York. It is a non-profit providing support in their community, battling addiction and mental health challenges, and is run by those who have overcome mental health issues, addiction, or trauma. It has a mobile response teams who work closely with police departments to respond to mental health calls. Steve Michio is the CEO of People USA and joins us now live. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Thank you for doing this. In your community, when you hear about a police-involved shooting where mental health is a consideration, what do you think about?
You always think about what happened. How did it happen? Could it have been prevented? And I do a root cause whenever there is a shooting like this, regardless of what kind of shooting it is, to understand, what may have happened, because you can easily armchair quarterback a situation and criticize it. But I think that, finding the truth out is really important. And so it's interesting what we find in most cases.
And once again, the ARC program here in Manitoba, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. So when your staff are called to a situation, are hours a factor, or what's their approach?
Being someone with lived experience, understanding the urgency of behavioral health and how people can feel and how it makes a community feel, instant access for me was a mission that I started almost 30 years ago. And our mobile teams will respond between 6 minutes and 13 minutes to the community, to the officers, or wherever they have to go, because that's what people need. They need that response. They need that kind of engagement.
And when you hear that the program here won't respond if violence could be a factor, are there any kinds of calls your teams are not allowed to respond to?
No, there really aren't. We have a very capable team. A lot of training goes into our teams. A lot of training also goes into the police department. We do the crisis intervention team training with the police department so that they understand a safer way for them to engage people. And we've been in very sticky situations at times, but we've also been able to alleviate the issue of violence or the threats. Not always, but in most cases we have. And so we're not looking at the severity of cases when we go into it. We just look at it when we're there. Is there danger? And if there is, then we bring our partners, the police department, in if we need to.
And we've often heard that the presence of a uniform can inflame and aggravate situations. And you talk about the relationship between your team and building that relationship with police. So ultimately, how did you build that relationship?
That was a challenge. Police departments weren't really receptive to people working with them, behavioral health specialists or especially peers, people with lived experience. They were in no way interested in that. And we had to model with our teams without working with the police before they started to embrace it. So they started to see how we engage, how we can help the community, how our outcomes were much better than what they were experiencing. And as they saw that, they started becoming curious. And now we had to build the integrity over the years to build that trust with the police departments. And we're one of their strongest partners now in dealing with behavioral health.
How are your staff trained to deal with these situations?
Well, we do so much training. In New York State, we have a peer certification they have to go through first, and then we do a lot of training around listening skills. I mean, a tremendous amount of training around listening skills, because that's mostly what people want, is they want to be validated, they want to be recognized, they want to be heard. And we do trauma-informed care training, we do motivational interview training, de-escalation training. We do a lot of education around safety. We work with some state police trainers that will show the staff where it's safest to stand, how it's safest to engage, and things like that. So we always have safety in our minds, but we're more focused on the individual we serve. And when they see that compassion and empathy of being more interested in them than fearful, we get a different relationship with them.
What have you noticed in the community with your presence?
The community is embracing how we're helping the communities, and they're often surprised at how fast the teams react, and also how quickly we get people into the services that they deserve and need. The important thing about us is that we don't give up. We'll engage someone one time, and then we'll follow up and follow up and follow up until we have this person on a better path of recovery, which creates safer communities, better outcomes for individuals, and also safer outcomes for police departments.
What could forces be doing differently when it comes to mental health calls?
It's really the training. There's international crisis intervention team training, which is a 40-hour training that it's mostly for seasoned officers that have been on the streets for years. And it really focuses on safety first, but it's an empathetic approach to not using command voices, which is what police officers are trained to do. Is control situations, but they can control through empathy, and we train them on that. Recovery and hope is important. Collaboration, understanding the resources in the community is real important for officers, because it's not always a jail or an emergency room. There's other options, and they have to build those partnerships and those collaborations to address those options. And it's a big stigma reduction. When officers go through our training, we often get their cell phones themselves because they're struggling with, vicarious trauma or trauma itself, and they want someone to talk to. So it builds a real strong and positive relationship with departments in helping them know what to do when they encounter people that are having substance or mental health issues, and also it provides support for them.
We could talk for hours about this. I hope you'll come back again and chat some more. Appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Steve Miccio is the CEO of People USA. We did request an interview with the Minister of Justice, Matt Wiebe. The Winnipeg Police Service declined an interview. We'll continue this series of interviews on police-involved shootings on mental health. All right, let's check in with Matt Humphrey at the news desk.
Good morning. For the fifth day now, searchers are back out looking for two boys who fell in Nunavik Lake. This morning, we're hearing from a lodge owner who says the family is overwhelmed by the support they're seeing from the community. 13-year-old Aaron O. Ramirez and his 10-year-old brother Maximo fell into the rapids near Sturgeon Falls on Saturday. We'll hear the latest at the bottom of the hour.
Thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
CBC's Matt Humphrey. As you're hearing, we are continuing to follow many local stories, and we will also hear from a criminologist about an India-based gang that has been active in other Canadian provinces, which may now have a presence here in Manitoba. That story after World Report. Stay with us. This is Information Radio.
I'm Garvia Bailey, in for Tom Power. The comedian Ron Funches was one of the standout participants on the last season of The Traitors. He'll tell you how being on the show led to an autism diagnosis that's changed his understanding of himself and the unique gifts that shape his comedy.
Okay, I want to lean into that, and I want to be, accepting of that.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Rebecca Zanbergen. Canada's premiers are meeting right now on Prince Edward Island, and there's a lot to talk about at this pivotal time for provinces and territories. Trade, national unity, pipelines, healthcare, and more. Coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. RCMP and West Kelowna have issued an Amber Alert for a 4-year-old boy. The Mounties say Ryan Atlas Andrews was last seen Tuesday morning, but RCMP say the boy goes by the name Atlas. He is described as 3 feet tall, 51 pounds, with short brown hair and hazel eyes. RCMP say he is believed to be with the 40-year-old suspect, Elise Andrews. They may be traveling in a black 2021 Nissan Qashqai. Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke virtually with the country's premiers yesterday. They're in Charlottetown for the Council of the Federation meeting. And the U.S. president's new tariff threat is on top of the agenda. Sources tell CBC Carney tasked the premiers to think about Canada's possible leverage. And it's reigniting a debate over whether Canada should threaten to restrict its energy exports to the U.S. The CBC's Janice McGregor reports.
Well, that's not going to happen.
With Alberta's sovereignty referendum coming up fast, Premier Danielle Smith's rejecting the idea of her province sacrificing resource revenue for the greater good.
I think that what will happen is that we're going to have a pretty intense period over the next 29 days, and I hope that diplomacy will prevail.
But wouldn't that diplomacy carry more weight if it was backed up by an energy threat? New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt thinks so.
We do sell a lot of energy products to New England. We put gas in their cars, we put jet fuel in their fighter jets, and we heat and cool their homes. And so we know that we have those kinds of tools at our disposal should we need them.
Sounds like a threat. Is it?
We have a lot of options on where we take our valuable natural resources and who we share them with.
More trade diversification away from the U.S. could pack a punch. Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Tony Wakeham.
I think what you're seeing now is Canada recognizing that it has a lot of value to provide to the world.
But staring down her fall election, Quebec Premier Christine Fréchette isn't prepared to cut Americans off from her province's hydroelectricity.
Personally, I'm not there. I want us to negotiate at the table, and we'll see in 30 days where we will end up.
Retaliation brought on these latest tariffs, the White House said. Retaliating even more might not stop them. Janice McGregor, CBC News, Charlottetown.
U.S. President Donald Trump's new tariffs are set to be front and center during a Senate hearing today. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer will testify about the president's trade agenda. It's expected to include some pointed questions. The CBC's Willie Lowry joins me now in Washington. And Willie, what can we expect during this morning's hearing?
Jamieson Greer is in many ways the architect of President Donald Trump's tariff policies, and he's set to appear before the Senate Finance Committee to address the president's trade agenda, which has been the source of contention and legal disputes here in the U.S. Back in February, the Supreme Court ruled against Trump's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to enforce tariffs. That did not deter the administration, which has since used several different justifications to impose global tariffs. The hearing also comes less than a month after the administration chose not to renew the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. Greer will likely be pressed on the U.S. decision to place 50% tariffs on a range of Canadian goods, as well as the status of various trade deals the administration has brokered.
Now, Jamieson Greer has indicated more tariffs are on the way. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, he certainly has. In an interview with CNBC yesterday, the U.S. Trade Representative says he expects tariffs on up to 60 countries over issues around forced labor.
So with forced labor, the Section 301 investigation of forced labor, again, the U.S. has laws to prohibit trading goods with forced labor. Other countries, most don't have a law. Those that do don't really enforce it. We expect to see some action soon. I can't really specify a timeline right now. I have a responsibility to brief Congress and other stakeholders before I really reveal that kind of thing, but we do expect action soon on that.
The Trump administration has been clear. It views tariffs as an important tool in its economic arsenal, and it appears determined to continue to apply them where it sees trade imbalances.
Thank you, Willie.
Sure thing.
The CBC's Willie Lowry in Washington. In southwestern Russia, a fire burns at a warehouse in Svratopol. The local governor says it was the target of a Ukrainian drone strike. The building houses Russia's largest online retailer. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says his military launched overnight strikes. They targeted Russian logistics centers and cargo ships. It came just hours after he fired his military commander-in-chief.
Я визначив, що новим головнокомандувачем Збройних сил України стане
Zelensky announcing the dismissal of Alexander Syrsky and his replacement. Syrsky's firing came after public pressure on Zelensky's administration following the dismissal of Defense Minister Mikhail Fedorov. Fedorov's removal resulted in mass protests. Many Ukrainians attribute the advances in the war against Russia to the former minister. We're following a developing story in British Columbia. Any remaining residents in Boston Bar are being told to get out immediately. A wildfire is burning out of control and spreading quickly. The order came from the Fraser Valley Regional District. It says the heat and strong winds ignited the wildfire south of the community. Many residents in Boston Bar have already been forced to leave their houses. There are 89 active wildfires currently burning across BC. 12 started in the last 24 hours. And First Nations chiefs in northwestern Ontario are calling for an inquiry into recent wildfire response. They allege that the government failed to protect some Indigenous communities from fires. More than a dozen communities are under evacuation orders, and 140 wildfires are burning across the region. As the CBC's Sarah Law reports, the leaders are seeking accountability.
How could this happen? More importantly, how do we make sure this never happens again?
Wilfred King is chief of Gull Bay First Nation. Like several communities in the region, he says his people had to lead their own evacuation efforts as wildfires loomed around them.
The lack of communication and evacuation support should horrify all Canadians.
In the past week, 2 First Nations were completely destroyed by wildfires, Nomegusasegigan and Whitewater Lake. King is among several First Nation chiefs calling for an independent investigation into how the government has handled the crisis. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says there's been constant communication with First Nations.
On reserve is a federal responsibility. Ontario's taken the lead on this.
King says Ottawa must also be held accountable, but First Nation chiefs will not accept jurisdictional disputes as an excuse for inaction. Evacuees have shared stories about fleeing in the night, leaving personal belongings and pets behind. Ontario NDP leader Marit Stiles says they should have been given more warning ahead of time.
There was no real preparation and no real notice from the government, and that they were asking for it. That's what's so frustrating.
Indigenous leaders say a public inquiry should examine everything from communications and evacuation planning to overall emergency preparedness. Sarah Law, CBC News, Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Small businesses across the country are considering their options with new tariff threats from the U.S. The CBC's Karen Pauls visited a beekeeper in rural Manitoba to learn what the new tariffs could mean for honey.
I'm looking after roughly 100 to 150 million bees.
Ian Stepler carefully opens a hive.
This top box is being filled up with honey.
He'll be harvesting this in just a few days.
I hope they produce a bumper crop for us, and when they do, we just want to get paid for it.
But that may be a problem, with U.S. President Donald Trump imposing a 50% tariff on everything from wine and hockey sticks to cement and agricultural products, including honey. There's a lot of uncertainty.
It could be disastrous. I mean, one of our biggest buyers is all of a sudden out of the marketplace.
Pascal Chan is Vice President of Strategic Policy and Supply Chains at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. He says the list of items to be tariffed may seem random,
but we don't think it is. These measures appear to have been designed very carefully to inflict pressure on.
in areas, he says, where the Trump administration believes it can have the greatest impact in destabilizing trade talks.
This is a pretty dangerous escalation.
It's not what Stepler, who's also chair of the Manitoba Beekeepers Association, wants to hear.
But it has the industry a little bit worked up right now, I can tell you that much.
For beekeepers still trying to recover from years of catastrophic colony losses and lower honey yields, Trump's tariffs couldn't come at a worse time. Karen Pauls, CBC News near Miami, Manitoba.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning to you. I'm Julie Buckingham in for Marcy Marcusa today. This is Information Radio on CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app, and of course, on YouTube. If you're just waking up and stretching, well, you've made it to Wednesday. Current temperature outside of our studio has not changed dramatically so far this morning. We're only up 1 degree from much earlier today. It is 16 outside our studios at Portage and Spence. But we are anticipating a very warm high of 27 today, and that's going to be the coolest day for the next week or so. Abby will bring us the full forecast in a moment, including how some parts of the province are under a yellow warning for air quality. Still to come on the show, a gang based in India with a growing presence in Canada being linked to a recent extortion case here in Winnipeg. We'll hear about that gang's activity in the country and whether you should be concerned. Let's head over to the news center. Here's Matt Humphrey.
Good morning. The search continues today at Nudimick Lake. This is day 5 of the search for 13-year-old Aaron O. Ramirez and his 10-year-old brother Maximo. On Saturday, they slipped on the rocks and fell into the water. A fleet of boats now and rescue teams are combing the waters again today. At the bottom of the hour, we'll hear from the operator of a local lodge who's been speaking with the family. And as you heard, many Manitoba business people say they're tired of tariff uncertainty as the U.S. announces a new 50% levy on a wide range of Canadian exports, including honey. Today, premiers are speaking to reporters ahead of the second day of the leadership meeting in Charlottetown. Wab Kinew is meeting with other leaders and the Prime Minister to come up with a response to this latest salvo from the U.S. We'll hear what the Premier had to say at the bottom of the hour.
Thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
Makes me feel like having toast and honey or tea with honey today. All this talk of honey is certainly making us think of things like that. And it is going to be a day where you might want to start with a warm beverage. It's a little bit chilly outside, Abby.
I tell you, it's a tale of our two cities this morning. We have smoke in the northern part of the province, and down south, we're starting this cool, mild day as we heat up to about 27 later in the day. But if we look at conditions from the part towards Tudula Lake this morning, most of the regions under this air quality warning, smoke drifting in from nearby wildfires, really making the air thick, and it's impacting visibility in that area, so take it easy. But the contrast is we have this bright day in the southern region. Here in the city, 16 degrees. We're enjoying lots of sunshine, expected to make a transition to a mix of sun and clouds later. You will notice local smoke and some breezy conditions as we aim for that humid high of 27 later, but the humidex is going to be around 30. You talk about this start to the stretch of warm trends that we're going to be getting, Julie. We are looking at tomorrow, Thursday. It will be a mainly sunny day, just with mild winds. The high for tomorrow, Julie, will be around 30 degrees, but the humidity is going to be close to 40. It's going to be around 37, and the UV will be on the high side tomorrow. And that's what we'll see into Friday. We're going to see close to 30 on Friday. We're going to see close to 30 on Saturday. So we are getting into more like the core of summer at
Yeah,
this
lots of
time.
humidity, and that's why I will just keep my hair curly
Yep.
because it's going to be that way anyway, thanks to the humidity. Thank you, Adam.
Just but for today, let's just enjoy let's enjoy the 18s and the 27s today.
That's right, and just 16 right now. So on the drive, Corey Funk?
Yeah, one call I just got from Tim. He says northbound Osborne, just before Confusion Corner, there's an illegally parked car causing issues, so keep left to get around that. If you see anything else, so you can give me a call, 204-788-3093.
"14 minutes after 8 o'clock, a gang run out of a prison cell in India is active in Canada, and it's now been linked with a recent extortion case right here in Winnipeg. The CBC's Corey Funk learned more about how this gang operates, Corey?
Yeah. It's called the Bishnoi Gang. It's a transnational crime group headed by Lawrence Bishnoi, who's been imprisoned in India for over a decade. Now, the Bishnoi Gang operates in Canada by targeting Indian Canadians in particular for extortion, and was labeled a terrorist entity actually by Canada in 2025. Wade Deisman is a criminologist and professor at the University of Fraser Valley, and he's researched Bishnoi Gang activity in Canada, and I spoke with him yesterday.
Good morning.
So can you just give us more details about how the Bishnoi Gang operates?
Well, the Bishnoi Gang is a very advanced, I think, transnational organization. Estimates put it at somewhere around 40 different countries it operates in. And the model that we've seen develop here in Canada is kind of like a franchise operation, if I can use that metaphor, where kind of local operations are established and then directions come from afar in terms of what kinds of activities they want to see carried out. It's what we call a polycriminal organization, which means that it's involved in a variety of different criminal activities, including drug dealing, including human trafficking, and as we're seeing here, including extortion and transnational repression.
Specifically, extortion is the case here in Winnipeg we're about to talk about. Can you just explain how what that kind of extortion tends to look like?
So extortion is a crime that typically is opportunistic in character. It involves targeting people who have some kind of financial assets and threatening to either bring them or their families into disrepute or to harm them in one way or another unless some kind of payment is received. Typically, it's set up at a fairly high organizational level and almost like a taxation scheme. The understanding is if you keep remitting some money to the organized crime organization in the form of some like a taxation almost, then your business will be permitted to proceed or your family will be safe, that kind of thing. If you decline to do that, then it's understood that there will be consequences, which would be very grave. In the case of the Bishnoi Gang, this includes not only threats to the people here in Canada, but threats to family members and relatives back home.
So this recent extortion case in Winnipeg is the first mention actually of the crime group in Manitoba. How long do you think the group has been active in this province? What does it kind of tell you about the presence that's here?
Well, we do know that it dates back to at least 2024 because we have evidence from another court filing involving the Kingra case, which involved someone who was recruited from Manitoba, from Winnipeg actually, who was working for a moving company, ended up going out to Collingwood and being involved in an extortion operation there. And there's fairly reliable evidence to show that the tendrils of the Bishnoi Gang kind of extend across Canada. We know that they're in Brampton, for example, in Toronto. We know that they're in Alberta and that kind of thing. And I think it just goes to the larger kind of modus operandi of this organization, that it will have corollary tendrils everywhere there is Indo-Canadian communities, because that's, of course, the through line here is that Indo-Canadian communities, particularly Sikh communities, are being targeted partially because of the vulnerability of the folks who live back home still in the Punjab, and that making for the extortion threat even more terrifying.
So this most recent case, then, does this kind of tell you this might just be the tip of the iceberg in terms of extortion that might be happening here in Manitoba right now?
Yeah, I think it's a civil forfeiture filing here, and so I think what it shows is what the operating methodology is of these folks. And one thing that they do is they target either students who are here on visas to carry out the kind of frontline kind of soldier in the field kind of activity, or they target people who are here on work visas or temporary visas, that kind of thing. And so I think it goes to reason that anywhere we have those kind of pockets of students, there is that, additional vulnerability there. We haven't seen it in the same protracted and aggravated sense as we've seen in places like Surrey, for example, because there is an additional dimension to the story here, and that is the transnational issue of the struggle for a kind of Khalistani independence movement. And that is imputed to be part of the motive behind some of this stuff.
So it's very complicated, obviously, but there's a certain brashness to the way that this gang operates, right? In January, police forces received an open letter from Bishnoi gang saying, quote, "We have more than 1,000 foot soldiers on the streets in Canada," unquote, and saying essentially that, you've been outmatched. Former BC police chief and Canadian politician Cash Heed has suggested that people who say they're connected to Bishnoi gang aren't always, but they use the name to create fear in victims. So what do you make of that assessment, that there's also these sort of not actually formally Bishnoi associated, but kind of Bishnoi inspired or adjacent operators out there as well that kind of use that name?
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly plausible supposition that we're going to see, to some extent, some kinds of copycat crime or people who are trying to trade on the name of the Bishnoi gang. And I think, to some extent, that's probably true. Although I have to say that, generally speaking, organized criminal gangs don't appreciate that. And there can be kind of, payback for using their name without their permission. It can be payback in the form of insisting that they get some of the profits, and then they just kind of reel that person into their criminal gang, or it can be other kinds of payback. So I think that's one of the cascading effects of this kind of crime becoming popular. And I think it goes to the heart of the public safety threat that we're dealing with, which is, at a certain point when communities are kind of pressed into submission like that, then they become sitting ducks, targets for anybody who comes along and says, unless you do what I say, violence will happen to you. And the problem with extortion crime in particular is that it has a very large dark figure, by which I mean there's a lot of extortion crime that goes unreported because part of the character of extortion crime is the threat that if you report this to the police, there will be very grave consequences for you. And so a lot of stuff doesn't get reported, and that's why we're in such a serious battle around that kind of thing. Here in Surrey and Abbotsford, it's taken the police quite a bit of time to just build enough public trust to open up the pipelines in terms of reporting.
The crime group has also been labeled a terrorist entity in Canada, but some argue this only actually strikes more fear and gives the group unnecessary power. What are your thoughts on that critique?
Yeah, I think that the worry there really is twofold. Is this the right set of tools for the kind of threat that we're dealing with? And I think the other one is the magnitude of the tools too extreme given the situation? And I think, and there's a third, I think, worry, and that is that, those terrorism offenses were created to deal with political issues associated with rule of law and national security. And they're seen as separate from criminal issues. But the reality is today that we're seeing more and more a conflation between criminal activities and political activities. That's why I use the term polycriminality, because one of the signature features of the Bishnoi gang is that it can be a proxy entity for states. That's the allegation in respect to the Indian state. So I think normally we would say we want to keep that terrorism category for those kinds of political crimes, but we're not looking at that kind of categorical separation anymore at all. We see these two activities and motives blending together more and more. And so I think in that context, we must be able to have tools that match the magnitude of the threat. And designating them a terrorist entity does give us additional financial tools, although the forfeiture tools that Manitoba has been using are adequate as well. But it gives a higher level of kind of coordination between federal FinTrack levels and Manitoba levels. The other thing it does is it gives a whole host of investigative powers to the police that are more, that are stronger than they would be just in a regular criminal investigation.
And finally here, how concerned should Manitobans be about Bishnoi gang activity in our province?
Well, I think it's a really good question. I think it goes to the immediate concern is that this is a particular kind of community or population within the broader population, right? It's the Indo-Canadian community, particularly the Sikh community, that is being targeted. And so, and I think there's been a struggle around recognizing that constitutes not just a threat to that community, but to all communities. Whenever a community is targeted for a particular reason, I think there's a duty of care that we all share to make sure that can't go on in Canada.
Wade Deisman, a criminologist and professor at the University of Fraser Valley, speaking with the CBC's Corey Funk. 16 degrees, 18 at 8:25.
I'm Jura McElwraith, your local reporter for CBC Manitoba in Steinbach. You're listening to CBC Radio 1.
Winnipeg's own Jacob Brudofsky has a new song out, inspired one of his favorite local haunts. See if you can guess which one. You're listening to CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM. Jacob Brudofsky with Restaurant.
In a lovely little restaurant on Ruby Street, there's a blind date in disrepair. She was eager to please, he's not hiding his sleeves as he rattles off the entrees they'll share. She should have seen it coming when he picked her up in a car with a Canadian flag. Now she's sitting in a lovely little restaurant with a migraine and a doggy bag. Shouldn't she be so lucky to have a place to pass the time? At least when she leaves unlucky, he'll have paid for her glass of wine. Street, a couple colleagues on the town. Since the boss got inspired to give up and retire, he tears up while he buys another round. He should have seen it coming when the world went dark. He found more to life than cashing a check. Now he's weeping in a lovely little restaurant, downing drinks while he drowns in debt. Shouldn't he be so lucky to have a place to run a tab? At least when he leaves drunk and ugly, there's someone there to call a cab. in a low-lit little restaurant on Ruby Street. I was watching you stare me down. You were patient and kind. I was out of my mind. My excuses you still allowed. We should have seen it coming, but we blinked our eyes. It's so sad how short the years have become. Now we're sighing in a low-lit little restaurant, holding tears back from all we've become. Shouldn't we be so lucky to exist like this at the same time? To have and to hold kids and a puppy, and a place like this to intertwine, and a place like this to intertwine.
Information Radio 89.3 FM, CBC Radio 1. Winnipeg's Jacob Borofsky with Restaurant. The one that inspired it, by the way, Bonnie Day in Wosley. The song is from his upcoming album, Tell the Kids We Tried. He just announced he's putting on an album release show at the Park Theatre in December. Your CBC News starts now.
This is CBC News. At 8:30, we're at 15 degrees with mostly clear skies in downtown Winnipeg. We are expecting wildfire smoke today as well. Good morning. I'm Matt Humphrey. Boats have been on the water of Nudimick Lake since 6 this morning, searching for 2 boys who fell into the water near Sturgeon Falls. It's day 5 of the search for 13-year-old Aaron O. Ramirez and his 10-year-old brother Maximo. Yesterday, there were as many as 15 boats on the water, along with RCMP and the Heart Search Team. Allison Baker Thiessen owns Nudimick Lodge, where the family's been staying. She says they're hurting, but glad for the community's support.
It's indescribable, the feeling that they're having. They definitely are overwhelmed and honored to have as many people willing to be out there endless days since Saturday, hours, helping them search for their boys.
Baker Thiessen says people from the boys' school came out to help with the search, and she says her phone has been ringing off the hook with people asking how they can help. Manitoba beekeepers are feeling stung by the latest round of U.S. tariffs. The Trump administration says it'll impose a 50% tax next month on a wide variety of Canadian exports, and one of those exports is honey, which has the chair of the Manitoba Beekeepers Association scratching his head. Ian Stepler says he's reaching out to his U.S. counterparts to help him understand why Canadian honey is being targeted.
We're asking them, what's the issue? Like, what is the deal? Is there any complaint? And if there is, then maybe we can work something out and figure out the solution to it. But right now, we're just this arbitrary 50% tariff put onto us for no reason whatsoever, and we don't know how to respond to it.
Stepler estimates about 20% of Manitoba honey is exported to the United States, accounting for between $6 and $8 million annually. Meanwhile, Canadian leaders are gathering in Charlottetown for their summer meeting. Today, premiers and the Prime Minister are expected to discuss a response to this latest trade threat from the United States.
Well, there's that old saying, right? Like a single arrow can be broken easily, but a bundle of arrows cannot be snapped. And so national unity is important, especially when we're going up against a much larger opponent like the American economy.
That's Premier Wab Kinew speaking to reporters this morning, saying a unified response is needed to deal with the tariffs. 7 other provinces are now joining Manitoba in removing major barriers to interprovincial sales of alcohol directly to consumers. And to enact those new tariffs, Donald Trump is using an obscure legal tool from the Great Depression. He's using Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930. It's meant to respond to situations where a foreign country discriminates against the commerce of the U.S. It requires no investigation, and there's no limit on how long the tariffs can stay in place. The law has never been used before by a president for tariffs. In other news, the Reeve of Swan Valley West says many there thought the province's flood recovery grant program would cover more. The province says the one-time program will help pay for some essential contents based on the average cost of replacing them in 2026. The program will also help cover basic needs and the cost of restoring homes to a functional state. Reeve Bill Gade says the grant program was painted in a more favorable light when first announced, and the latest details may be disappointing to some constituents.
We've had a lot of our residents here go and take a line of credit or get a credit card to be able to buy the things they need, assuming they're now going to get paid back for that. And there's a surprise coming when they submit $20,000 or $30,000 of bills and instead get a $5,000 check. That's going to be very hard on people if they don't realize that's a risk they're facing.
Gade says other people are just happy to be getting anything at all. Residents applying to the program are being asked to sign a waiver committing to get more information about adequate flood insurance. And finally, in case you missed it, Manitoba's NDP has tightened its grip on a traditional stronghold. Jennifer Flett was the runaway winner of yesterday's by-election in the Pas-Comisac. The New Democrat captured 75% of the vote after the NDP won 67% of the votes in 2023. Flett is a former corrections worker and counselor at a Pasquiac Cree Nation. She says she won't forget all the people she met campaigning across the very large riding.
A lot of them were saying that, we don't want to just see you at election time. We want to see you come into our communities, take part in our activities and our day-to-day lives. We want you to hear us and we want to work with you. And I told them that I want to work with you as well.
Flett now succeeds longtime NDP MLA Amanda Laughlin, who died from an illness earlier this year. The Progressive Conservative candidate came second, beating out the Keystone Party candidate and the Manitoba Liberal Party candidate. And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks for the morning, Julie.
You too. Matt Humphrey at the local news desk. Corey Funk is back with a final check on our traffic.
Yes, the only issue I've heard of recently was from Tim. He said northbound Osborne, just before Confusion Corner. There's an illegally parked car in the right-hand lane.
I remarkably knew what you meant anyway.
A parked car.
Yeah.
Keep left to get around that might be causing some issues on that already, pretty confusing intersection. So, but other than that, it's pretty quiet commute overall.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Abby Adeyemi, one final check on our forecast, which looks pretty nice here.
Yeah, looking at southern regions, we're seeing temperatures between 14 and 18 at this time. Clear skies. We do have some winds coming in. We're going to reach a high of 27 today. Lots of sunshine in the forecast, but up north, it's more about the smoke and highs close to 27. Winnipeg, we're at 16 and we get to 27. The humidity will be around 30 today.
Oh, thank you for the day, Abby. Also to Corey Funk and Darian Morash, who has been looking after the YouTube feed. Our associate producers, Emily Enns, Sierra Sanders, Michaela Van Kooten, as well as Kaylin Monkman. Our news team, Matt Humphrey, Joni Nicolo, Darren Bernhardt, and Megan Ketchison. Nellie Gonzalez is our show producer for Current Affairs. Leif Larson is our senior producer of audio. I'm Julie Buckingham. Thank you for joining me today, filling in for Marcy Marcusa. Be well. Stay with us.